My name is Giovanni Indigo. I am 35 years old. 4 years ago, the swollen banks of an Idaho river swept me away, taking my memories with it. My wife Vivian and my brother Marcus did not send search parties. They did not print flyers. They simply waited the minimum legal requirement, declared me dead in absentia, and collected a $5 million life insurance policy. I spent years in a rural clinic as an unidentified trauma patient, trying to remember my own name. When the fog finally lifted 72 hours ago, I discovered Vivian had not just moved on. She had married my former business partner, Trent, and they were currently petitioning a Boise civil court to liquidate my final remaining asset. They expected a quiet legal proceeding to secure their stolen wealth. What they got was a ghost walking through the courtroom doors. Before I share the details of this confrontation, let me know your age and where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe to the Linda Vengeance channel if you have ever had to rise from the ashes to destroy the toxic people who left you behind. The air inside the Boise Civil Court tasted of lemon polish and stagnant bureaucracy. Judge Harrison held his wooden gavel suspended a fraction of an inch from striking the sound block. One tap and my generational mountain cabin in the Sawtooths would be legally liquidated, transformed into a neat sum of capital for my grieving widow. I pushed the double oak doors at the back of the gallery. The brass hinges let out a low, protesting groan that echoed through the quiet room. Every head turned. I walked down the center aisle. My shoes, bought for $12 at a local thrift store, scuffed softly against the polished hardwood. The cheap charcoal fabric of my jacket pulled tight across my shoulders. It smelled faintly of mothballs and stale dust, a stark contrast to the tailored Italian wool I preferred during my days as a senior financial auditor. Sitting in the petitioner row, Vivian turned her head. The color drained from her cheeks in an instant, leaving her designer makeup looking like a hollow mask. Her fingers went slack. The leather handbag resting on her lap slipped off, hitting the floor. The bespoke metal clasp fractured with a sharp crack that sliced through the stifling silence. Beside her, Trent froze. My former business partner stared at me, his jaw clenched so tight a pale line formed along his cheek. He wore my favorite brand of silk tie. He sat in the chair paid for by my demise. "I object to the liquidation of this estate, Your Honor," I said, stopping just behind the low wooden barrier separating the gallery from the bench. The judge lowered his gavel. He peered over his wire-rimmed reading glasses. "You are the anonymous claimant who filed the digital injunction last night?" "I am." Vivian shot out of her chair. It tipped backward, clattering against the wooden railing. "Bailiff, remove him!" Her voice cracked, soaring into a frantic pitch. "This is a sick extortion attempt. My husband drowned 4 years ago. This man is a deranged imposter." She played the traumatized widow well. 4 years prior, she wept on local television while search teams dragged the river. A few months later, she cashed a check for $5 million. Now she stood shoulder to shoulder with the man who helped run our auditing firm. The bailiff unclipped the strap of his holster, stepping toward me. "Sir, I need to see a state-issued identification." "I do not have one," I replied, keeping my hands visible and my gaze locked entirely on the bench. My wife had me declared legally dead. Judge Harrison frowned, his posture shifting. "If you cannot produce government identification, I will hold you in contempt and proceed with the probate." I shifted my focus to Trent. He sat perfectly still, breathing shallow breaths. "I do not need a driver license to prove who I am," I said, my tone cool and measured. Trent let us talk about Cayman Enterprise Holdings, routing number ending in 4409, account 81B. That is the blind trust where you parked our firm quarterly tax surplus 2 weeks before the flood. Trent stopped breathing. A slick sheen of sweat appeared at his temples. Those numbers existed strictly in the encrypted ledgers we built together. No imposter could ever access them. The courtroom fell into a tense, suffocated hush. Judge Harrison studied Trent, noting his pale, terrified reaction. The judge looked back at me and set his gavel aside. Probate is stayed, the judge announced, his voice carrying a new, cautious edge. I am ordering an immediate biometric verification. Bailiff, arrange a mandated DNA swab. In the first row of the public gallery, my younger brother Marcus sat rigidly. He had not spoken a single word since I walked in. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught the faint pale glow of a smartphone screen shielded low against his chest. His thumb moved in rapid, frantic swipes across the glass. The problem has returned. 72 hours before stepping into that courtroom, I was sitting on a stiff vinyl bed in a rural clinic on the outskirts of Twin Falls. The jagged scar on my hairline throbbed a dull rhythm. It was the only physical map of the raging river that took my memory. For 4 years, I was John Doe. I swept the clinic floors to earn my keep, trapped in a thick fog of disconnected numbers and faceless voices. Then, 3 days ago, a nurse dropped a metal tray of surgical instruments. The sharp, piercing clatter triggered a cascade of hidden neurons. The fog shattered. My name, my career, my life rushed back with the force of a physical blow. I did not alert the hospital staff. I quietly borrowed a tablet from the nurse's station during the night shift. I typed my own name into the search engine, expecting to find missing person posters or desperate pleas from my family. Instead, I found an obituary. Giovanni Indigo, beloved husband and brother, lost to the river. I scrolled through the public records. The timeline painted a clear, disturbing picture. Vivian and Marcus did not fund private search teams. They filed the death in absentia paperwork at the earliest legal opportunity. They held a lavish memorial service just 3 weeks after the floodwaters receded. They buried an empty casket and smiled for the cameras. My fingers flew across the digital keyboard. As a financial auditor, I knew how to trace digital footprints. I bypassed the basic security protocols of my old cloud backups. I found the insurance policy documents. Vivian upgraded my life insurance coverage just 2 months prior to my accident. I clicked on her public social media profiles. She had not spent the last 4 years mourning. Photographs showed her traveling the world, dripping in new jewelry, and kissing Trent. They were living in the custom estate I designed. I found a digital receipt in a shared folder she forgot to close. She sold my cherished, inherited vintage watch collection to a private dealer. She used the cash to buy a purebred dog. She erased my existence from the world. I tracked their recent local court filings. I saw the impending probate hearing designed to quietly liquidate my family mountain cabin. They thought the money train would run forever. They thought the river had silenced me for good. I left the clinic before sunrise. I walked 10 miles to a pawn shop and traded my only possession of value, a silver ring I wore when they found me, for a cheap laptop and a bus ticket to Boise. I rented a dingy motel room near the courthouse. I spent 2 sleepless nights building a ghost network, mapping the flow of the $5 million payout. I traced the money through a labyrinth of shell companies, funding their opulent new lifestyle. I could have called the police. I could have walked into a precinct and declared my identity. But a phone call would be too polite for this level of the trail. I needed them to see me. I needed to watch the blood drain from their faces when they realized their stolen empire was built on a foundation of lies. I bought the thrift store suit, walked into the courthouse, and filed the anonymous injunction. I set the stage for their execution. Back in the present, the judge slammed his gavel, dismissing the court, pending the DNA results. The bailiff escorted me toward the holding area for the biometric swab. I cast one final glance over my shoulder. Vivian clutched Trent by the arm, her manicured nails digging into his expensive suit. Marcus was still staring at his phone screen. They thought the DNA test was their biggest threat. They had no idea I spent the last 48 hours setting digital traps inside their unencrypted home servers. The biometric verification would take 2 days. I only needed half that time to choke the financial life out of their stolen kingdom. The linoleum floor of the rural clinic smelled of stale bleach and defeated hope. For 4 years, I pushed a damp mop across that very floor, responding to the name John. My reflection in the cracked mirror above the staff sink showed a stranger. I raised my hand, dragging my fingertips across the jagged, faded scar tracing my hairline. The raised tissue was a physical map of the stolen years, a permanent reminder of the roaring river that smashed my skull against submerged bedrock. 3 days ago, the thick mental fog finally shattered. A metal surgical tray dropped in the hallway. The piercing clatter echoed like a gunshot, and the locked vault in my mind sprang open. I remembered the crisp scent of my bespoke suits. I remembered the complex financial algorithms I ran as a senior auditor. I remembered the exact shade of my wife's eyes. I did not rush to the nurses to proclaim my identity. A man declaring his true name after 4 years of profound amnesia invites psychiatric holds, heavy sedatives, and endless bureaucratic delays. I needed raw information, not a straitjacket. I waited for the night shift to settle into a predictable rhythm. Nurse Jenkins was a creature of strict habit. At precisely 2 in the morning, she abandoned the primary workstation to smoke behind the loading dock. I slipped behind the reception desk, my heart thudding against my ribs. Her terminal was locked. A numerical keypad blocked my access to the internet. I crouched in the dim fluorescent light, studying the smudge marks on the glass screen. 4 numbers bore the heavy residue of daily use. 1984. Her birth year. I punched the digits. The screen glowed green, granting me a portal to the outside world. My hands shook as they hovered over the keyboard. I typed Giovanni Indigo. My chest tightened, anticipating missing person alerts, dedicated search websites, or desperate pleas from my family begging for any information. The search engine delivered a single, crushing blow. It was an obituary published in the local Boise Gazette. I clicked the link, reading the sanitized, hollow summary of my existence. Beloved husband, lost to the Snake River, survived by his devoted wife Vivian and loyal brother Marcus. The dates printed on the screen told a terrifying, undeniable story. The obituary was published a mere 60 days after the county issued the initial flood warnings. The legal minimum to declare a missing person dead in absentia in our jurisdiction requires specific, expedited court petitions. They did not hire private search and rescue teams. They did not scour the muddy riverbanks looking for my body. They filed the legal paperwork, ordered a caterer, and buried an empty casket. My analytical mind forcefully overrode the rising panic. As a seasoned auditor, I always followed the paper trail. I navigated to the login portal of my old cloud storage. The primary password had been altered, but Vivian never understood complex network architecture. I bypassed the main firewall using a backdoor authentication protocol I wrote a decade ago. The digital files cascaded down the screen, revealing their hidden actions. I opened our joint financial ledgers. A PDF document flagged with high priority sat in the main directory. It was a life insurance policy, $5 million. I stared at the digital signature at the bottom of the page. Vivian upgraded my standard corporate policy to a premium accidental death plan exactly 2 months prior to our weekend trip to the river. The timing was far too precise to be considered a coincidence. She insured my life for a fortune, and 60 days later, I drowned. I pulled the banking statements linked directly to the death benefit. The payout executed flawlessly. The funds were immediately divided. Marcus received a $1 million transfer. I searched my brother-associated financial records. Marcus had always been a severe liability, constantly drowning in illegal gambling debts and begging me for bailouts to keep the loan sharks away. The ledger showed he used his cut of my death benefit to clear his accounts with local bookies within a week of the funeral. My own flesh and blood traded my life to wipe his slate clean. He sold his loyalty for a fresh start. I shifted my focus back to Vivian. I needed to see where the remaining $4 million landed. I accessed her public social media footprint. She maintained a pristine, careful image of the grieving widow for about 6 months. Then the narrative shifted drastically. Photographs appeared showing expensive tropical vacations, new luxury vehicles, and heavy designer jewelry. She was not alone in these pictures. She was smiling brightly, holding a crystal champagne flute, leaning intimately against the shoulder of Trent. Trent was my protege. I taught him everything he knew about corporate auditing. We built our consulting firm together. I zoomed in on the background of their most recent photo. The ornate iron staircase and the specific cut of the marble countertops were unmistakable. They were standing in the kitchen of the estate I custom designed. I picked out that imported stone. I drafted those exact blueprints. Vivian did not just replace me with my business partner. She moved him into my home. He was wearing my tailored clothes. He was living my life. I clicked on a short video posted to her feed. Vivian was laughing, tossing a toy to a purebred golden retriever on the manicured lawn. The caption read, "Trent bought me the perfect gift to start our new chapter." I analyzed the background details of the video as the camera panned. The glass display case in the study was visible through the patio doors. My vintage watch collection, a set of rare, irreplaceable timepieces passed down from my grandfather, was gone. The velvet shelves were entirely empty. I cross-referenced her recent financial uploads. She sold the entire collection to a private dealer just to purchase the dog. She erased my physical legacy to buy a pet with the man who helped steal my life. I heard the heavy squeak of the loading dock door opening down the hall. Nurse Jenkins was returning from her break. I quickly closed the browser, wiped the digital history, and locked the terminal. I retreated to the utility closet, my pulse hammering a steady, lethal rhythm against my ribs. I had the facts. They orchestrated my demise, collected the payout, and built a luxurious kingdom on my grave. But they made one crucial error. They forgot to verify if the body washed ashore. I spent the next 48 hours planning my extraction. I walked out of the clinic before dawn, trading my only silver ring at a roadside pawn shop for a cheap laptop and a bus ticket to Boise. Sitting in a dim, rundown motel room, I mapped their current vulnerabilities. The court dockets revealed their final legal maneuver. They were petitioning the civil court to liquidate the generational mountain cabin, the very last piece of property tied to my name. They wanted the cash, and they wanted the past erased forever. I stared at the glowing screen of the cheap laptop. The probate hearing was scheduled for 9 in the morning. I did not shed a single tear for the wife who betrayed me or the brother who sold me out. I packed my digital tools and prepared to walk into that courtroom. I was ready to show them that dead men can still sign checks and ghosts can still foreclose on a house. The rain lashed against the thin glass of room 114. A neon vacancy sign buzzed outside, casting a harsh, rhythmic crimson glow across the sagging mattress. I sat cross-legged on the faded bedspread, resting the pawnshop laptop on my knees. Its cooling fan whirred a loud, steady complaint as I pushed the cheap processor to its limits. For 4 years, my hands knew only the coarse wooden handle of a clinic mop. Now my fingers danced across the plastic keyboard, guided by muscle memory that refused to die. I needed a secure environment before I could hunt. I opened a command terminal and routed my connection through a series of offshore proxy servers, bouncing my signal from servers in Iceland down to Singapore before looping back to Idaho. I stripped away my digital footprint, transforming myself into an untraceable ghost hovering over the local networks. Trent was a brilliant salesman, but an inherently lazy architect. During our years building the auditing firm, I constantly berated him for leaving default administration ports open on his private servers. Arrogant people rarely change their fundamental habits. I pinged the external internet protocol address of the custom estate I designed. The security firewall defending their home network was a generic, off-the-shelf software package. It took me less than 12 minutes to crack the weak encryption key using a brute force script. The digital gates swung wide open. I was inside my own home again, drifting invisibly through their shared hard drives and personal folders. The financial directory was a sprawling labyrinth of hastily constructed entities. I opened a spreadsheet labeled Third Quarter Projections. The $5 million life insurance payout did not sit idle in a standard savings account. Trent fed the money into a complex web of limited liability corporations registered in Delaware. He funneled the cash through dummy vendors to artificially inflate the revenue of his new tech consulting firm. He was using my death benefit to trick venture capitalists into believing his startup was profitable. I traced a specific wire transfer down the ledger. $2 million washed through a corporate account and landed directly into a joint checking portfolio. They used it to pay off the final mortgage balance on the estate, effectively purchasing my dream house with my own blood money. I watched the cursor blink on the screen, feeling a cold surgical detachment settle over my mind. I shifted my focus to their personal expenses, scrolling through recent credit card statements and digital receipts. A specific invoice caught my attention, buried inside a folder labeled Household Upgrades. The header belonged to a premier vintage horologist based in Seattle. Vivian executed a private sale exactly 3 months after my funeral. I clicked open the itemized list, and my breath caught tight in my throat. She liquidated my entire inherited watch collection. The 1960s Patek Philippe my grandfather wore during his wedding, the engraved silver Rolex my father handed down to me on my college graduation, priceless family heirlooms auctioned off to a stranger for a fraction of their true worth. I checked the corresponding outgoing transaction from that exact same week. The dollar amount from the watch sale was transferred to an elite breeder in Oregon. She sold 3 generations of my family history to purchase a purebred golden retriever. The profound callousness of that transaction burned a hole through my chest. I was not just replaced by another man. I was erased, traded away for a household pet. I dug deeper into their recent checking statements. A new pressing vulnerability emerged from the numbers. Trent was bleeding cash. His fake consulting firm burned through operating capital faster than he could launder the remaining insurance funds. They were experiencing a severe liquidity crisis. They needed an immediate influx of cash to maintain their opulent facade. I accessed the local Ada County public court dockets, running a search on Vivian's name. A pending legal filing flashed across my screen, stamped with an urgent status. It was a formal petition for a probate hearing. Vivian was requesting emergency judicial authorization to liquidate the Indigo family mountain cabin. My father and I built that cabin in the Sawtooth Mountains with our bare hands. I remembered the scent of rich pine, the rough texture of the logs, and the bitter cold winters spent sitting around the stone hearth. It was the only tangible piece of my childhood left in the world. Vivian intended to sell it to a commercial real estate developer for a quick, under-the-table cash buyout. The hearing was scheduled for 9 o'clock the following morning. A rational citizen would call the local authorities. A normal man would walk into a police precinct, present his fingerprints, and wait for the slow gears of the justice system to halt the sale. I was no longer a normal man. 4 years in a rural clinic scrubbing floors strips away the desire for polite resolutions. A phone call would give them time to prepare. A phone call would allow Vivian to hire lawyers and craft a new lie, framing my return as a confusing tragedy rather than an exposed crime. I needed a far more precise strike. I needed to look them in the eye as their stolen kingdom crumbled around them. I powered down the laptop and tucked it carefully into a cheap canvas backpack. The sky outside the motel window began to lighten, bleeding a pale gray dawn across the wet asphalt of the parking lot. I left the room and walked 3 blocks down the street to a sprawling thrift store, just as the manager unlocked the front glass doors. I navigated the narrow aisles, searching the racks of discarded clothing. I selected a charcoal gray suit. The fabric was stiff, smelling faintly of old cedar and neglect. The fit was slightly loose around my shoulders, a testament to the muscle weight I lost during my amnesiac years. I paid $12 at the cash register, offering the clerk a polite nod. I slipped into the suit in the cramped bathroom of a nearby gas station. I splashed cold water on my face, staring at the jagged scar near my hairline in the stained mirror. The lost victim washed away down the drain. The predator awakened in his place. I adjusted the cheap lapels, feeling the rough material against my neck. I stepped out into the crisp Idaho morning air and hailed a passing yellow taxi. I slid into the back seat and gave the driver the address for the Boise Civil Courthouse. I watched the city streets blur past the rain-streaked window, calculating every angle, every variable of the impending confrontation. They believed they had perfectly scrubbed my existence from the earth. I was going to push open those heavy oak doors and show them that buried secrets rarely stay underground. The heavy oak doors of the Boise courthouse clicked shut behind me. The cool Idaho air hit my face, carrying the scent of impending rain. The judge granted a 48-hour window for the biometric verification to process. 2 days. To the legal system, 48 hours is a brief administrative pause. To an auditor hunting a stolen empire, it is an eternity of tactical advantage. I walked down the concrete steps, blending into the midday crowd. My pockets were empty. My legitimate bank accounts remained frozen under my deceased status. I possessed nothing but the clothes on my back and the digital keys to my enemy's ruin. I sat inside a rented sedan parked at the far edge of a supermarket lot. The vehicle smelled of stale coffee and cheap upholstery cleaner. I unwrapped a cold, stiff turkey sandwich bought with the last few dollars of my pawn shop cash. Chewing the tasteless meal, I balanced the cheap laptop on the steering wheel. The local news broadcast streamed across the screen. Vivian moved fast. She hired a top-tier crisis management firm within an hour of the gavel dropping. She appeared on screen sitting in the custom-designed living room I paid for, clutching a folded tissue. Her performance was flawless. Tears welled in her eyes, never quite spilling over to ruin her mascara. She stared directly into the camera lens, her voice trembling with practiced sorrow. "This man is a cruel opportunist," Vivian pleaded to the viewing audience. "My husband Giovanni perished in the floods 4 years ago. The pain of losing him tore our family apart. Now an imposter is exploiting our enduring grief, using stolen personal details to extort an innocent family. Please respect our privacy as we let the authorities handle this sick scam." I swallowed a dry bite of bread. During our marriage, Vivian treated public perception as a weapon. She meticulously curated our social calendar, ensuring we attended the right charity galas and befriended the most influential politicians. Her tears on the broadcast were just another calculated asset allocation. She expected me to panic. She wanted the public pressure to break my resolve, assuming a penniless amnesiac would flee back into the shadows rather than face a protracted legal battle. She did not realize she was fighting a ghost, holding the blueprint to her vault. I tossed the remainder of the sandwich onto the passenger seat and cracked my knuckles. The public relations war belonged to her. The financial slaughter belonged to me. I tunneled back into Trent unencrypted home server, bypassing the weak firewall with the same custom script I used the night before. Trent built his fake consulting firm on a foundation of quicksand. Searching through his corporate ledgers, I found the inevitable rot. Trent lacked the patience required for sustainable business growth. To project immediate success, he financed his new venture through short-term, high-interest commercial loans. These predatory lenders operated in the gray areas of corporate finance, charging astronomical rates in exchange for rapid liquidity. His current operational debt sat at a staggering $2.5 million. He paid the minimum monthly balances using the laundered life insurance funds, keeping the loan sharks temporarily satisfied. I did not need a federal court order to ruin him. I just needed to change the direction of the current. Using my offshore proxy network, I established a blind holding company registered in Cyprus. I named it Riverstone Capital. I forged the necessary digital incorporation documents, weaving a fake but impenetrable corporate history. Then I initiated a direct communication protocol with Trent, primary creditor, a ruthless financing syndicate based in Nevada. I offered to purchase Trent's entire debt portfolio outright, paying a slight premium over the current market value, using a diverted stream of Trent-owned laundered funds. I essentially used his stolen money to buy the chains wrapped around his neck. The Nevada syndicate authorized the transfer within an hour, eager to offload the high-risk portfolio. I was now Trent's sole creditor. I held the legal right to recall the entire loan at a moment's notice, a clause buried deep within the original predatory contract he foolishly signed. Next, I accessed the central routing hub for his consulting firm. Trent scheduled payroll and vendor disbursements for that exact afternoon. I deployed a silent logic bomb into his payment gateway. The code did not steal the money. It merely redirected the outbound capital into a frozen escrow account, triggering an automated fraud alert across his entire banking network. His operating capital vanished into a digital void. Across town, Trent was attempting to maintain his facade. I hacked into his mobile device, tracking his global positioning coordinates. He was attending an elite luncheon at the premier country club in the foothills. He was surrounded by potential venture capitalists and local politicians desperate to secure legitimate funding to keep his sinking ship afloat. I activated the microphone on his phone, listening to the ambient noise of clinking crystal and polite applause. Trent was holding court, his voice dripping with forced confidence. He spun tales of exponential growth and proprietary software algorithms he did not understand. When the lunch concluded, he boldly offered to cover the extravagant bill for the entire table of investors. It was a classic power move designed to project endless resources. I listened as the waiter returned to the table. The subtle murmur of conversation halted. "I am sorry, sir," the waiter murmured, keeping his tone discreet but audible. "Your card was declined." Trent let out a sharp, breathless laugh. "A simple clerical error," he announced to the silent table. "My accounting department must be updating the corporate limits. Run it again." I smiled at the laptop screen. I typed a swift command, forcing the terminal to reject the transaction a second time. The machine returned a hard decline, sir, the waiter replied, his polite facade cracking slightly. The bank instructed us to retain the physical card due to suspected fraudulent activity. Do you have an alternative method of payment? The silence among the investors deepened. A declined platinum card at a high society event was the ultimate kiss of death. It shattered the illusion of prosperity faster than any legal indictment. Trent stammered, fumbling through his Italian leather wallet. I heard the unmistakable rustle of panic. He produced a personal credit card, attempting to salvage the humiliating disaster. I intercepted that authorization request before it even reached the clearinghouse. Decline. "I am afraid that one is also rejected, sir," the waiter stated, his voice now carrying a distinct edge of suspicion. Trent muttered frantic apologies to the venture capitalists, his previous arrogance dissolving into pure humiliation. The men excused themselves quickly, fleeing the radioactive stench of insolvency. They would never invest a single dime in his firm. Trent was left standing alone in the dining room, stripped of his corporate armor, staring at the useless plastic in his hands. He sprinted out of the country club, the audio feed capturing his ragged, desperate breaths as he reached his car. He slammed the heavy door shut and dialed his chief financial officer. He screamed into the receiver, demanding to know why the corporate accounts were locked. The confused executive explained that the entire operating budget had inexplicably vanished into a security hold, and the bank required Trent to appear in person with physical identification to resolve the issue. Before Trent could formulate a response, I triggered the final phase of my trap. I routed an automated digital notification directly to his mobile screen, bypassing his spam filters and priority inboxes. The alert pinged sharply through the car speakers. I watched the data packet hit his device. The message was drafted with cold, flawless legal precision. It informed him that his entire commercial debt portfolio had been acquired by Riverstone Capital. Furthermore, due to the sudden unauthorized freezing of his operational assets, Riverstone Capital was activating the immediate default clause. The anonymous holding firm demanded full repayment of the $2.5 million principal within 24 hours. Failure to comply would result in the immediate seizure of all personal property acting as collateral. Trent dropped his phone. The heavy thud echoed over the intercepted audio feed. He was trapped. His startup was paralyzed, his reputation was ruined, and a faceless entity held the deed to his stolen life. He had no idea the executioner holding the axe was the very man he left to drown 4 years ago. The neon sign outside room 114 flickered, casting a rhythmic red glow across the peeling wallpaper. I sat at the small laminate desk, my fingers resting on the pawnshop laptop. The trap I laid for Trent required a specific type of bait. Arrogance blinds a man to his own vulnerabilities. Trent always believed he was the smartest person in the room. I needed to feed that delusion. I opened a webmail client and composed a message to a fictional attorney in Boise. The subject line referenced the impending probate hearing for the Sawtooth cabin. I crafted the text with calculated desperation. I wrote that I possessed no funds, no resources, and no leverage to stop Trent from ruling the corporate landscape. I pleaded with the imaginary lawyer to focus every ounce of legal effort strictly on saving the generational mountain property. I detailed sentimental attachments, claiming the timber and stone structure was the only thing I cared about reclaiming. I routed the email through a poorly secured server, deliberately leaving digital breadcrumbs trailing right back to the domain names Trent routinely monitored. I accessed the hidden backdoor I established on his home network. The web camera mounted on his private study monitor flickered to life. The video feed rendered in sharp, high definition. Trent stood in the center of the luxurious room, pacing like a caged animal. The financial chokehold I initiated earlier that afternoon had pushed him to the brink of panic. He stopped in front of a gilded floor mirror. He reached up, his trembling fingers fumbling with the knot of his silk tie. The accessory was a convincing counterfeit, a knockoff designer brand he likely purchased to project a level of wealth he no longer legally possessed. He smoothed the cheap fabric down his chest, taking a shallow, ragged breath. He was a hollow shell of a corporate executive trying to maintain an illusion of prosperity while standing on quicksand. The chime of an incoming email echoed through the study speakers. He scrambled toward the polished mahogany desk, pulling up the intercepted message I had just planted. I watched his eyes dart across the screen as he read my fabricated plea. The tight, terrified lines around his mouth slowly smoothed out, replaced by a familiar, cruel smirk. He bought the lie. He read the words of a broke, sentimental loser crying over a childhood cabin, and he felt his superior status return. Trent snatched his mobile phone and dialed his personal wealth manager. I intercepted the audio feed. He ordered the urgent liquidation of his last remaining personal stock portfolios, demanding the cash be routed to a premier real estate defense firm in downtown Boise. He instructed the attorneys to build an impenetrable legal wall around the Sawtooth property. By pouring his remaining liquid capital into an expensive legal defense for a sentimental piece of real estate, Trent left his corporate flank entirely exposed. He spent his final lifeline guarding a pile of wood and stone, stripping his technology startup of any potential financial rescue. He fell for the red herring, hook, line, and sinker. I closed the video feed, a cold satisfaction settling deep within my chest. A sharp, frantic knocking at my motel door shattered the quiet concentration in the room. I minimized my command terminal, sliding a blank browser window over the screen. I stood up, adjusting the lapels of my $12 suit. I unlatched the deadbolt and pulled the door open. Marcus stood on the rain-slicked concrete walkway. Rainwater dripped from the brim of his baseball cap, soaking into the shoulders of his faded jacket. He smelled of cheap alcohol and stale sweat. My younger brother always looked for the easiest path through life, treating personal responsibility like a toxic disease. During our 20s, I constantly bailed him out of bad investments and illicit gambling debts, covering his tracks to protect our family name. He rewarded that loyalty by selling my memory to the highest bidder, using his cut of my life insurance to settle accounts with his bookies. Now the easy money was gone, and the consequences of his actions were finally catching up to him. He pushed his way into the cramped motel room without an invitation. He looked around at the stained carpet and the cheap furniture shivering from the cold dampness. "Giovanni," he started, his voice cracking into a pathetic, high-pitched whine, "I have been looking everywhere for you since the courthouse. You have to believe me. I did not know what Vivian was planning back then. I thought you were really gone." I leaned against the heavy wooden door, crossing my arms over my chest. I did not offer him a towel. I did not offer him a seat. I just stared at the man who shared my blood, feeling an icy void where brotherly affection used to reside. "You cashed $1 million check 60 days after they found my empty raft, I stated, keeping my tone flat and unyielding. You paid off the sports syndicate in Las Vegas. Do not insult my intelligence by claiming ignorance. Marcus collapsed onto the edge of the sagging mattress. He buried his face in his hands, letting out a loud, theatrical sob. The tears were genuine, but they were born from pure self-preservation, not remorse. Trent is broke, Marcus blurted out, his shoulders heaving. His accounts are locked, and Vivian is screaming about a crisis. The men I owe money to, they do not care about frozen bank accounts. They are looking for me. They said if I do not deliver a payment by tomorrow night, they are going to break my legs. You have to help me, brother. Please. Just give me enough cash to get out of the state. He looked up, his bloodshot eyes silently begging for the familiar safety net I used to provide. Marcus had always been a master of the victim narrative. When he crashed my first car at 17, he blamed the slippery roads. When he failed out of a prestigious university, he blamed the professors. The world was always conspiring against him, and I was always the shield protecting him from the consequences. I looked at his shaking hands, noticing the dirt under his fingernails. The luxury he bought with my life was slipping through his fingers, leaving behind the frightened boy he always truly was. I felt no pity. The river washed away my sense of blind familial duty. I do not have any money, Marcus. My accounts are frozen because you swore an oath in a court of law that I was deceased, I replied, my voice slicing through the stale room like a razor. And even if I held the entire wealth of the world in my hands, I would not give you a single dime to buy your freedom. You dug this grave, now you get to lie in it. Get out. His jaw dropped in stunned disbelief. He stood up slowly, realizing the endless well of my generosity had permanently dried up. He backed toward the open doorway, his face twisting into a mask of bitter resentment. You are a cold bastard, he spat, stepping out into the driving rain. I shut the door, securing the deadbolt with a definitive metallic click. I did not waste a fraction of a second mourning the fractured relationship. I returned to the laminate desk, opening the cheap laptop to resume my hunt. The financial trap tightening around Trent and Vivian required constant monitoring. I refreshed the digital dashboard tracking the flow of capital through their hidden offshore networks. A new alert flashed across the screen, glowing bright yellow against the dark command terminal. A high-priority wire transfer had just been initiated, bypassing the standard security holds I placed on Trent corporate ledgers. The origin of the transfer was not connected to my former business partner or my treacherous wife. I traced the digital signature, unraveling the encrypted routing code. The account belonged to Sylvia, my own mother. She was a woman who worshipped the appearance of propriety. Growing up, she demanded flawless report cards and pressed shirts, preferring the illusion of a perfect family over the messy reality of genuine connection. She spent her days in an upscale Boise condominium, attending charity luncheons and shielding her eyes from anything unpleasant. Her sudden, urgent utilization of international tax havens shattered that delicate facade. I watched the data packet hit the international clearinghouse. Sylvia was attempting to urgently move exactly $500,000 into a secured holding account located in the Cayman Islands. It was a classic evasion tactic designed to hide illicit funds from impending federal scrutiny. The numbers on the screen painted a horrifying, undeniable reality. $500,000 did not simply appear in a retiree checking account by accident. The payout was far too precise. My mother possessed a fortune, and she was fleeing the fallout before the storm even broke. The rain transitioned into a fine, freezing mist by the time I parked outside the gated luxury condominiums in downtown Boise. Sylvia lived on the penthouse floor. Growing up, my mother treated her children less like human beings and more like expensive accessories to be paraded at society fundraisers. She valued polished mahogany and country club memberships over genuine affection. I bypassed the building security concierge by slipping through the service entrance, a route I memorized years ago when delivering her dry cleaning. The elevator ride felt agonizingly slow. The polished brass doors slid apart, releasing the heavy scent of lavender and expensive vanilla candles. I knocked on the heavy oak door of Unit 701. Footsteps echoed from within, followed by the slide of a deadbolt. Sylvia opened the door. She wore a tailored cashmere sweater and pearl earrings, dressed impeccably despite the early hour. Her eyes, the same piercing blue as my own, widened. She dropped the crystal wine glass she was holding. It shattered on the imported marble tile, scattering pale liquid across the foyer. A normal mother would fall to her knees. A normal parent would weep, pulling her lost son into a desperate embrace, thanking Providence for a miracle. Sylvia did not shed a single tear. Her face hardened, contorting into a mask of pure, unadulterated outrage. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, glancing frantically down the pristine hallway to ensure none of her wealthy neighbors were watching. She grabbed my sleeve, pulling me inside and slamming the door shut. "Do you have any idea what kind of chaos you are causing? My phone has been ringing since yesterday. Vivian is a wreck. Trent is ruined." I looked at the woman who gave me life. The icy detachment in my chest spread, freezing the last remaining embers of familial hope. I was dead, Mother. I spent 4 years scrubbing floors in a clinic, trying to remember my own name. And your first concern is a social inconvenience. Sylvia paced the length of her immaculate living room. "You were gone, Giovanni." We mourned. We held a beautiful service. The bishop spoke. I finally found peace, and my retirement was secure. Now you march back into town, wearing rags, and tear down everything we built. Everything you built, I repeated, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You mean the $500,000 you tried to wire to the Cayman Islands 20 minutes ago?" I froze that transaction, by the way. The money is locked. Sylvia stopped pacing. The blood drained from her face, leaving her looking fragile and old. I stepped closer, letting the sheer weight of my presence trap her against a velvet sofa. "You did not earn that money. Vivian paid you." I checked the police reports from the week of the flood. They needed a verified timeline to process the missing person declaration so quickly. You corroborated her story. You told the detectives you spoke to me on the phone, confirming I went into the river alone. You lied to the authorities to ensure the life insurance payout cleared without an investigation. You sold your son for $500,000. She lifted her chin, attempting to summon the haughty, matriarchal authority she wielded throughout my childhood. "You were already gone," she justified, her tone dripping with toxic pragmatism. "The search team said the rapids were too fast. The water was freezing. Nobody could survive that current." Vivian offered a way to ensure our family did not suffer financially. I made a practical decision. Sylvia instinctively reached out. Her manicured fingers moved toward my neck, intending to smooth the rumpled collar of my thrift store suit out of sheer, deeply ingrained habit. It was a gesture she performed 1,000 times before church services and school photos. I took a deliberate step backward. Her hand grasped nothing but empty air. That single silent motion severed the maternal bond forever. I was no longer her son. I was an auditor exposing a syndicate. Practical, I echoed, tasting the bitter irony. You are going to need a very practical defense attorney. Sylvia narrowed her eyes, the panic giving way to a ruthless, calculated glare. She walked over to her polished glass desk and picked up a cordless telephone. "You think you hold all the cards because you know a few computer tricks," she sneered. "You are a man who spent 4 years in a mental fog. You do not even possess a legal identity. You are a Jane Doe with a stolen suit." She punched a series of numbers into the keypad. "I am calling Dr. Eris Thorne. He is the chief of psychiatry at Boise General. I am filing an emergency petition for a medical conservatorship. I will tell him my traumatized, deeply confused son has returned from the wilderness, suffering from severe paranoid delusions. I will have you committed to a locked psychiatric ward by noon. You will not have access to a laptop. You will not have access to the courts. You will be a heavily medicated ghost." She pressed the call button, raising the receiver to her ear with a triumphant smirk. I did not try to snatch the phone from her hand. I simply turned my back on her and walked out of the condominium. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me. sealing her inside her crumbling fortress. I rode the elevator down to the parking garage, retrieving the cheap computer from my rental car. I sat in the driver's seat, listening to the relentless drumming of the rain against the windshield. Sylvia thought she could weaponize the medical system to bury me a second time. She underestimated the digital vulnerabilities of elite physicians. I connected to the secure hospital network using a spoofed credential set I harvested months ago. I located the private digital archives belonging to Dr. Eris Thorne. Wealthy doctors catering to high society clients rarely keep clean ledgers. I bypassed his personal firewall in less than 10 minutes. The resulting data dump provided a treasure trove of medical malpractice. Thorne routinely prescribed highly restricted narcotics to wealthy Boise teenagers in exchange for lucrative kickbacks. He falsified psychiatric evaluations for corporate executives seeking early retirement packages. I compiled the illicit prescriptions, the forged diagnostic reports, and the direct deposits linking him to pharmaceutical bribes. I drafted a highly encrypted email and sent it directly to the doctor's personal inbox. I attached a single file containing the undeniable proof of his illegal operations. The text of my message was brief and razor sharp. It informed him that a copy of this dossier was currently queued to send to the State Medical Board and the Federal Drug Enforcement Agency. To halt the automated transmission, he needed to instantly reject any conservatorship petition submitted by Sylvia Indigo. I watched my digital dashboard monitoring the network traffic emanating from Sylvia's penthouse router. The trap snapped shut almost instantly. Within 5 minutes, a new data packet surged through her local connection. I intercepted the communication. It was an email from Dr. Thorne. He officially declined her request for a psychiatric evaluation, citing an abrupt conflict of interest, and advised her to never contact his private practice again. Her medical guillotine shattered before the blade could even drop. I leaned back against the cheap upholstery of my rental car, waiting for her next move. A cornered predator always makes a mistake. Sylvia exhausted her legal options. She could not buy her way out. She could not drug me into submission. Her only remaining choice was panic. My intercept software pinged with a distinct audio chime. Sylvia bypassed her standard email client and utilized an encrypted messaging application, assuming the military-grade security would protect her correspondence. She sent a single, frantic text message directly to Vivian's mobile device. My decryption key cracked the cipher in seconds. The text rendered in bright white letters across my dark terminal screen. The conservatorship failed. He knows about the money. Handle him exactly like we did during the flood. The glowing words burned into my retinas. A sudden chilling realization rushed through my veins, freezing the breath in my lungs. For 4 years, I believed my fall into the raging river was a tragic accident. I believed I slipped on the wet rocks while setting up the camping gear. Sylvia's text message proved my disappearance was never an accident. It was a planned, coordinated execution. They did not just abandon me. They tried to murder me. The glowing letters hung on my screen, casting a harsh glare in the dim motel room. My breath hitched. For 4 years, I carried the heavy burden of my own supposed clumsiness. I believed I lost my footing on the slick river stones. I believed the raging Idaho waters claimed me by sheer chance, while my wife and business partner slept safely at the trail lodge. The text message shattered that naive assumption. My disappearance was not a tragic accident born of bad weather. It was an execution. A chilling realization crept up my spine. They did not just steal my wealth. They plotted my end. The financial crimes were merely the spoils of a premeditated murder. I needed undeniable proof. I routed my connection through a secure virtual private network, masking my signature before striking a telecommunications archive. During my tenure as a senior auditor, I often utilized backdoor access to cellular tower records to verify corporate travel expenses. Telecommunication companies rarely purge raw metadata. They simply bury it deep within archaic legacy servers. I deployed a specialized extraction script targeting the specific geographic grid surrounding the Snake River on the exact date of my drowning. The code sifted through billions of dormant data points. Lines of text cascaded across my monitor until the script isolated 3 distinct mobile identifiers. One belonged to my old phone, the device swallowed by the rapids. The other two belonged to Vivian and Trent. I mapped the coordinates onto a digital topographical grid. The red markers blinked steadily, painting a terrifying picture of their movements. According to their official police statements, Vivian and Trent remained at the high-elevation lodge, huddled by the fireplace while the storm raged. The cellular data told a different story. Their signal pings tracked directly down the muddy embankment. They walked right to the edge of the river. They were standing mere feet away when the water took me. The digital map triggered a visceral reaction in my brain. The sterilized clinic floors faded. The smell of stale motel carpet vanished. Suddenly, I felt the freezing sting of the current pulling me under. I heard the deafening roar of the flash flood. I remembered fighting the undertow, my lungs burning as I broke the surface. I reached out, my fingers wrapping around a thick, sturdy pine branch jutting from the muddy bank. I was pulling myself up. I was surviving. Then a shadow loomed over me. A figure stood on the muddy ridge. I remembered looking up, expecting a rescuing hand. Instead, a heavy leather hiking boot stomped down on my freezing knuckles. The boot twisted, grinding my skin against the rough bark. A sharp kick followed, dislodging the heavy wood from the embankment. The branch splintered. My lifeline snapped. The river dragged me back into the dark depths, smashing my skull against a submerged rock. I blinked, pulling myself back to the present. The phantom pain in my knuckles throbbed. The boot belonged to Trent. He stood there and condemned me to the depths, ensuring the life insurance payout would clear. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I needed to see exactly what they did after leaving me to drown. I bypassed the encrypted layers of Vivian's old synced cloud drive, targeting the deleted file registry. People often believe sending a photo to the digital trash bin erases it from existence. They never account for the hidden backup caches storing temporary thumbnails. I initiated a deep recovery scan. A single image materialized on the screen. It was geotagged, just a few miles away from the river, time-stamped a mere 2 hours after the county sirens blared the initial flood warnings. The photograph showed the interior of Trent's luxury sport utility vehicle. Vivian sat in the passenger seat. She held a crystal champagne flute, her lips curled into a victorious, chilling smile. Trent sat behind the steering wheel, raising his own glass in a celebratory toast. Their clothing was perfectly dry. They were drinking expensive wine, while my lungs filled with muddy water. The sheer callousness of the image radiated from the monitor. They celebrated their newfound wealth, while my broken body drifted downstream. The financial chokehold I placed on their startup was a fitting punishment for their greed. But attempted murder required a different caliber of retribution. I needed to break Trent from the inside out. I needed him to feel the same suffocating panic I felt beneath the freezing rapids. I pivoted my digital assault toward Trent's physical location. Despite his frozen corporate accounts, he maintained a lease on a sleek executive office in downtown Boise. He sat behind a glass desk, desperately trying to project an aura of control to his remaining employees. I accessed the building's unsecured network, slipping past the generic firewall protecting the executive suite. I tapped into the high-resolution security camera mounted in the corner of his ceiling. The live feed loaded. Trent was pacing behind his desk, rubbing his temples. His tie hung loose around his neck. The illusion of the untouchable corporate titan was rapidly deteriorating. He looked like a trapped rat cornered by invisible forces he could not comprehend. I targeted the private laser printer resting on a sleek credenza near his window. I did not send a lengthy threat. I did not demand a confession. Terror is most effective when it is brief and precise. I typed a single line of text into a blank document. 43.5912 degrees north, 115.8241 degrees west. They were the exact global positioning coordinates of the riverbank where he kicked the branch away. I hit the print command. On the video feed, Trent flinched as the printer hummed to life. The mechanical whirring sound sliced through the quiet tension of his office. He stopped pacing and turned toward the credenza. He had not authorized any documents. He approached the machine cautiously, his brow furrowed in confusion. He pulled the single sheet of crisp white paper from the output tray. I watched his eyes scan the printed numbers. The reaction was instantaneous and profound. The remaining color drained from his face, leaving his skin a sickly ashen gray. His knees buckled slightly, forcing him to grip the edge of his glass desk for support. The paper trembled in his grip. He recognized the geographic markers. He realized the ghost haunting his bank accounts was not just a disgruntled hacker or a clever imposter seeking a quick payout. The ghost possessed his darkest, most lethal secret. Trent stumbled backward, knocking a crystal paperweight off his desk. It struck the hardwood floor, cracking into jagged pieces. He tore the paper into tiny shreds, tossing them into the trash can, as if destroying the document would somehow erase the truth. He darted toward the office blinds, yanking them shut to block out the city skyline. He stared at the ceiling corners, his eyes darting wildly, sensing the invisible eyes monitoring his breakdown. Paranoia took root, wrapping its cold vines around his fracturing mind. He grabbed a secondary burner phone from his desk drawer. This device was not connected to his corporate network or his personal cellular plan. It was a dedicated line for illicit transactions, a tool he likely used to communicate with the predatory lenders I currently controlled. He paced the length of his shadowed office, holding the device to his ear. I routed my intercept software to track the outgoing signal. He was not calling a defense attorney. He was not calling the police. The dial tone connected to a private security firm operating on the fringes of the law. These were not licensed bodyguards in tailored suits. They were shadow operators, ex-military mercenaries who specialized in quiet, untraceable extractions and off-the-books problem-solving. Trent spoke in hushed, frantic tones. He demanded an immediate dispatch. He ordered them to utilize any means necessary to track the origin of the network breaches. He wanted the anonymous hacker located, neutralized, and erased before the sun set. He authorized an open budget, promising to liquidate his remaining hidden assets to fund the lethal contract. I closed the audio feed, a grim satisfaction settling over my features. The bait worked flawlessly. Trent realized the civil courts and financial maneuvers could no longer protect him. He escalated the conflict, transitioning from white-collar defense to raw physical violence. He dispatched a team of trained killers to hunt me down. The digital warfare was over. The physical hunt had officially begun. I powered down my cheap laptop and slipped it into my canvas backpack. The dim motel room suddenly felt like a cage. I needed to move. They were coming for blood, but they had no idea they were walking into a trap set by a man who already survived his own execution. I slipped out the back exit of the rundown motel, melting into the rain-slicked alleys of downtown Boise. The shadow mercenaries Trent dispatched would trace my previous internet protocol address to room 114 within the hour. Let them find an empty laminate desk and a cold cup of coffee. The digital battlefield was shifting, and I required a sanctuary far beyond the reach of hired muscle. I navigated through the industrial district, pulling the collar of my cheap thrift store suit high against the freezing wind. I sought refuge inside an abandoned municipal archive facility, a forgotten concrete fortress I audited during the very early days of my career. The city left the building to decay, but I knew the subterranean basement still harbored an active, unsecured fiber optic line. The heavy metal door groaned in protest as I pried it open. The interior air tasted of decaying paper and damp concrete. I descended the stairwell into the windowless basement, relying on the faint illumination of my mobile screen. I found the ancient server rack coated in a thick layer of dust. I brushed the grime away, connected my pawn shop laptop to the rogue terminal, and restored my encrypted network tunnel. The mercenaries were searching the streets above, but my mind was already plunging back into the digital depths. A profound question burned in my thoughts, refusing to let me rest. The $5 million life insurance payout provided a lucrative windfall, but it failed to offer a logical motive for premeditated murder. Trent was a junior partner at our consulting firm. He possessed a six-figure salary and a clear trajectory toward immense wealth. Risking a lethal prison sentence for an insurance check contradicted his inherent cowardice. There had to be a foundational catalyst, a terrifying threat that demanded my permanent erasure. I tunneled into the deepest, most fortified layers of my former auditing firm. The corporate legacy servers remained archived and untouched, serving as a digital graveyard for closed accounts from 4 years ago. I spent 3 grueling hours cracking the intricate firewalls holding the high net worth client portfolios. I built that firm from the ground up. I poured my sweat, my intellect, and my youth into securing those elite corporate contracts. Navigating the old digital infrastructure felt like walking through the ghost of my own ruined past. The encrypted ledgers unspooled across my glowing monitor. I initiated a comprehensive forensic diagnostic on the quarter leading up to my fateful camping trip. The automated script finished its scan, painting a chilling, indisputable portrait of systemic theft. I stared at the red deficit numbers illuminating the dark screen. $10 million. That was the staggering amount of capital siphoned from our most prestigious clients. The money was hidden beneath fabricated balance sheets, phantom vendor invoices, and intricate shadow accounts. Vivian, operating as the chief financial officer of our joint enterprise, and Trent, managing the daily client relations, had spent 3 years draining the firm dry. They lived far beyond their means, funding their secret, lavish romance with embezzled corporate funds. But their reckless greed reached a critical breaking point. An external federal compliance audit was scheduled for the following fiscal year. The missing $10 million would trigger immediate federal indictments. They faced decades in a penitentiary. They needed a scapegoat. A missing, presumed dead senior partner served as the perfect fall guy. My demise was staged with impeccable timing to absorb the total weight of their catastrophic theft. They framed a ghost, leaving my professional legacy in tatters, while they walked away with clean hands and full pockets. I isolated the specific fraudulent wire transfers used to drain the client accounts. The digital authorizations bore my electronic signature. To a standard regulatory investigator, the paperwork looked flawless, cementing my guilt. But I designed the internal security architecture of that firm, and I never trusted surface-level authentication. I embedded a biometric keystroke logger deep within the administrative portal, silently recording the unique typing rhythm and key press duration of every user. I pulled the raw metric data from the fraudulent transfers, analyzing the rhythmic patterns. My typing cadence was always methodical, characterized by distinct micropauses between numeric entries as I mentally verified the sums. The keystroke signature stamped on the stolen transfers lacked those subtle pauses. The data revealed a rushed, erratic, heavy-handed typing rhythm. It perfectly matched Trent's typing pattern. He sat at my desk, forged my digital identity, and framed me for a ruinous crime before condemning me to the freezing rapids. This revelation shifted the entire scope of the war. I was no longer fighting merely to reclaim my identity or punish a treacherous spouse. I was fighting to resurrect my reputation. They tarnished my name, stamping thief on my gravestone to ensure their own survival. I switched my surveillance feed to monitor Vivian Needing to gauge her reaction to the collapsing financial walls. The psychological pressure from the frozen checking accounts and the ruined credit cards was fracturing her composed country club facade. With Trent spiraling into paranoid delusions and the elite society members turning their backs on her, she realized the invisible noose was pulling tight. Her fierce survival instinct easily overrode her superficial loyalty to her new husband. I tapped into her mobile device, watching her screen mirror onto my laptop. She was pacing the hardwood floors of the custom estate, her bags already packed and resting by the front door. She accessed a premium real estate brokerage portal. Vivian initiated a rapid, desperate liquidation protocol. She listed 3 lucrative luxury investment properties, including a sprawling lakefront condominium and a highly profitable commercial retail plaza. She set the asking prices at 30% below market value, demanding cash-only offers with immediate closing terms. She was orchestrating a frantic fire sale. She intended to grab whatever liquid capital she could salvage from the wreckage and flee the state, leaving Trent to face the impending federal wrath alone. I intercepted the listing confirmations before they ever reached the broker inbox. I redirected her frantic emails into a digital quarantine, ensuring the properties remained unsold and her escape route remained entirely blocked. She was trapped in the cage she built with my money. However, a glaring obstacle stood between me and true justice. Digital footprints, hidden ledgers, and keystroke metrics provide strong circumstantial evidence, but high-priced defense attorneys excel at creating reasonable doubt, arguing that networks can be hacked and data can be manipulated. To secure airtight, undeniable federal indictments for a $10 million embezzlement scheme, I needed physical proof. I required the original, notarized contracts they drafted to quietly divide the stolen client funds before the flood ever occurred. I knew Vivian better than she knew herself. She possessed a deeply ingrained paranoia. She never trusted digital clouds or encrypted hard drives for her most perilous secrets. She required the tangible comfort of paper and ink. She kept a secure safety deposit box at a private, highly fortified banking facility in the center of downtown Boise. That steel vault held the original documents detailing their conspiracy. It held the rope needed to hang them both in a court of law. I closed my laptop, the glow fading from the damp concrete walls of the archive basement. I needed to breach an impenetrable bank vault, and I needed to do it before the mercenaries found my trail. The gray morning light struggled to pierce the thick layer of storm clouds hanging over downtown Boise. I stood across the street from the First Meridian Trust building, watching the rain wash down the dark tinted glass of the financial fortress. This institution catered exclusively to the ultra-wealthy, offering fortified safety deposit boxes and unparalleled discretion. 5 years ago, during the peak of my consulting career, I audited their internal security protocols. I mapped every blind spot, every shift change, and every redundant alarm trigger. They relied on a rigid hierarchy, a system where authority was rarely questioned by the lower-level staff. I intended to exploit that exact weakness. My $12 suit was damp, but I straightened the lapels, channeling the unyielding confidence of a senior executive. I pulled my mobile device from my pocket. While hiding in the municipal archive basement, I wrote a specialized network script designed to interact with the bank's secondary infrastructure. I did not target the vault systems, which were air-gapped and highly monitored. Instead, I aimed for the environmental control servers on the upper administrative floors. I pressed the execution command. Across the street, the lights on the 3rd and 4th floors flickered. The building automated blinds rolled up and down in rapid, chaotic sequences. The heating and cooling systems surged, triggering an influx of localized maintenance errors. It was not a robbery attempt. It was an annoyance, a sudden swarm of technical glitches designed to pull the attention of the senior management away from the lobby. I crossed the wet asphalt and pushed through the heavy revolving doors. The interior of the bank smelled of lemon polish and rich leather. The main reception area was buzzing with quiet confusion. Security guards tapped their earpieces, listening to frantic chatter from the maintenance teams upstairs. I bypassed the teller line and walked directly toward the restricted access elevator leading to the subterranean vault. A uniformed guard stepped into my path, raising a hand. "Sir, this sector is restricted to verified clients only." I did not break my stride. I reached into my inner pocket and produced a laminated corporate compliance badge. I forged the credential overnight, matching the exact holographic overlay the bank utilized for third-party auditors. "I am the regional director for the Independent Oversight Committee," I stated, my voice projecting a sharp, impatient authority. "Your senior manager, David, authorized a phantom audit of the lower vault containment protocols. Given the network cascade currently plaguing your upper floors, I suggest you allow me to complete my diagnostic before the federal examiners arrive tomorrow morning." The guard hesitated. He glanced toward the ceiling where a ventilation grate was currently emitting a high-pitched mechanical whine due to my digital sabotage. The chaos upstairs validated my presence. People rarely question a confident man holding a clipboard during a crisis. The guard swiped his master keycard, granting me access to the private elevator. I descended into the silent, fortified basement. The air down here was different, scrubbed clean and chilled to a precise temperature to preserve delicate documents. A secondary vault attendant sat behind bulletproof glass. I flashed the forged badge again, citing the same phantom compliance audit. She buzzed me through the reinforced steel gate, pointing me toward the private viewing rooms. I stepped into the main vault. Rows of polished steel boxes stretched along the walls, gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. I located box number 412. It belonged to Vivian. I did not possess her physical key, but a physical key is merely a suggestion to an auditor who understands the mechanical flaws of standard safety deposit locks. I pulled a tension wrench and a specialized picking tool from my sleeve. It took 70 seconds of careful manipulation before the internal pins aligned. The heavy metal drawer slid open with a soft, satisfying glide. I reached into the dark enclosure, my knuckles brushing against the cold steel interior. The sudden freezing contact sent a fierce shockwave through my nervous system. The marble floors vanished. The sterile scent of the bank evaporated. I was plunging back into the raging currents of the Snake River. The suffocating chill gripped my limbs, pulling me down into the muddy darkness. I felt the water flooding my lungs, the frantic desperation of a drowning man clawing at the rocky riverbed. I heard the splintering crack of the pine branch as Trent kicked my only lifeline away. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing the horrific memory back into the locked vault of my mind. I drew a deep, ragged breath, anchoring myself to the present reality. I was standing in a secure banking facility in Boise. I was the predator, not the prey. I looked down at the contents of the box. Resting on top of a velvet tray was a thick manila envelope. I pulled it out and untied the string closure. Inside sat a stack of pristine, notarized legal documents. I scanned the first page and a cold satisfaction radiated through my chest. It was a formal, binding contract drafted between Vivian and Trent. The paperwork detailed the exact division of $10 million in diverted corporate funds. The dates printed next to their signatures were the most damning element. They executed this agreement exactly 3 weeks prior to our camping trip. It was the undeniable physical proof of premeditated embezzlement, establishing the exact motive for my staged demise. I folded the documents and tucked them securely into the inner pocket of my suit jacket. I slid the metal drawer shut and relocked the mechanism, leaving no trace of my intrusion. As I turned to leave, the heavy primary vault door swung wide open. The senior branch manager stepped into the room. Her name tag read Helen. Her sharp eyes darted from the rows of boxes to my face. She froze. I recognized her from my legitimate auditing days, and unfortunately, she recognized me. Mr. Indigo, Helen gasped, her hand instinctively reaching toward the panic button holstered on her belt. The local news said you returned, but our system registry still flags your profile as deceased. You are not authorized to be in this sector. I did not panic. I closed the distance between us with measured, unhurried steps. Helen, you and I both know the corporate registry is fraught with legacy errors, I said, maintaining a warm, conversational tone. My firm initiated a phantom stress test precisely to identify these systemic flaws. The board of directors sent a detailed diagnostic memo regarding my clearance at 8 o'clock this morning. Check your priority inbox. You will see my authorization overriding the outdated status. She paused, her hand hovering over the alarm trigger. The sheer confidence of my lie disrupted her protocol training. The ongoing technical glitches on the upper floors added a layer of plausible deniability to my claim. I need to verify this with the regional director, Helen murmured, pulling a two-way radio from her hip. You should, I agreed, offering a polite nod. Tell him the lower vault passed the physical breach test, but the digital registry requires immediate patching. I will wait for your confirmation in the lobby. I stepped past her, moving smoothly toward the elevator. I did not run. Running triggers a primal pursuit response. I walked with the deliberate pace of a man who owned the building. I rode the elevator up, crossed the bustling reception area, and pushed through the revolving glass doors just as the shrill, piercing shriek of the security alarms finally erupted behind me. I melted into the crowded sidewalk, disappearing into the gray morning rain. The physical evidence was secure against my chest. The financial snare was set. It was time to watch the syndicate tear itself apart. I sat in my rental car parked 3 blocks away, monitoring the audio feed I planted on Vivian's mobile device. The wait lasted barely 3 hours. A sleek, luxury utility vehicle screeched to a halt in the loading zone outside the bank. Vivian threw open the driver's side door, sprinting through the rain toward the entrance. She had received an alert regarding the vault breach and rushed to secure her illicit insurance policy. 10 minutes later, the audio intercept crackled to life. Vivian was back inside her vehicle, her breath coming in ragged, hysterical gasps. She dialed a number, the keypad tones echoing sharply over the feed. "Marcus," she shrieked, her voice stripped of all its refined high society elegance. "The safety deposit box is empty. The contracts are gone. You gave him the vault key. You sold us out to save yourself, you miserable coward." The trust binding the conspirators fractured irreparably, leaving them vulnerable, terrified, and ready to destroy each other. The rain drummed a relentless cadence against the roof of my rental sedan. I sat parked in the shadows of a vacant commercial lot, the audio intercept from Vivian's mobile phone piping through my encrypted headset. Her hysterical accusations against Marcus echoed in the confined space. She called my brother a coward, blaming him for the missing contracts. Marcus denied everything, his voice cracking with genuine panic. He swore he never touched the vault key. Vivian terminated the call with a sharp click. She was driving back to the custom estate. I followed her digital breadcrumbs, pulling up the hidden interior cameras I compromised days ago. I wanted a front-row seat to their destruction. The high-definition video feed from the grand foyer flickered to life on my monitor. Trent paced near the front door. He looked disheveled and frantic. His fake designer tie was gone discarded somewhere in his office. His shirt collar hung open, wrinkled and damp with nervous sweat. He gripped a heavy crystal tumbler filled with amber liquor. The front doors swung open. Vivian marched inside, drenched from the storm, her expensive coat dripping rainwater onto the imported hardwood floors. Trent demanded to know her whereabouts. He shouted about the frozen startup funds and the phantom creditor foreclosing on his debt. He sought a lifeline, hoping his wife possessed a hidden reserve of capital. Vivian offered no comfort. She shrieked that the safety deposit box was empty. The predated embezzlement contracts were missing. The physical proof of their $10 million theft was gone. Trent dropped his tumbler. The crystal shattered against the floorboards. The amber liquid stained the pristine rug I purchased during a trip to Istanbul. The polished illusion of their sophisticated romance evaporated, replaced by the raw, ugly reality of 2 cornered predators. Trent accused Vivian of hoarding the money and planning to flee without him. He revealed he found the canceled real estate listings on her computer. He knew she tried to orchestrate a fire sale to escape the state and leave him holding the bag. Vivian countered, shrieking that Trent was a monumental failure. She claimed he ruined their perfect scheme by taking predatory loans and drawing unnecessary attention to their finances. She called him a weak, pathetic imitation of the man she used to be married to. The insult struck a deep, agonizing nerve. Trent stepped closer, his face twisted in unvarnished rage. He threatened to contact the federal prosecutors immediately. He promised to pin the entire $10 million theft on her, stating she manipulated the corporate books as the chief financial officer. He vowed to tell the authorities she acted alone. Vivian stepped back into the courtyard atrium, standing near the decorative marble fountain I commissioned years ago for our first anniversary. The water cascaded down the sculpted stone, creating a serene backdrop to their venomous argument. She looked at Trent with pure, unfiltered hatred. She raised her left hand. The heavy diamond wedding ring he bought her caught the dim chandelier light. She slid the platinum band off her finger. She called him a cowardly liability. She hurled the diamond into the fountain. It sank to the bottom, resting among the scattered copper pennies and decorative river stones. The marriage was over. It dissolved the very moment the stolen money stopped flowing. They both realized the grim reality of federal indictments. In the realm of high-stakes financial conspiracy, the first person to secure a plea deal survives. while the second person serves decades in a federal penitentiary. Trent rushed back to his home office, locking the heavy oak door behind him. He dialed his high-priced defense attorney. He demanded an emergency meeting to discuss turning state evidence against his wife. Vivian pulled her phone from her wet coat frantically, contacting a rival law firm. She ordered her legal counsel to draft divorce papers immediately and contact the district attorney to negotiate full immunity. I watched them scramble, tearing their own syndicate apart. The unyielding solidarity they shared while plotting my demise crumbled under the heavy weight of self-preservation. They were doing my work for me, building the very cages that would hold them. While the husband and wife raced to betray one another, the shockwaves reached the weakest link in their chain. Marcus sat in his cramped apartment across town. I monitored his digital activity through a cloned mirroring application. He attempted to access the shared cloud drive he used to communicate with Vivian. A stark red error message appeared on his screen. He found himself locked out. Vivian revoked his administrative privileges, cutting him off from their shared resources. Marcus was a man who spent his entire life avoiding consequences, letting me absorb the impact of his mistakes. He always relied on my protective shield to navigate his reckless choices. Now, the shield was gone. He stared at the locked screen, realizing Vivian and Trent were building their respective defense strategies. They needed a scapegoat to absorb the brunt of the criminal charges. A brother burdened by gambling debts and a history of erratic behavior made the perfect target. They intended to throw him to the wolves, blaming him for the forged insurance documents and the missing vault contracts. The local bookies were already hunting him for unpaid debts. The federal authorities would soon follow. Marcus was trapped in a tightening vice. Pure panic overrode his fragile loyalty. He searched his apartment, tearing through desk drawers and jacket pockets. He needed a bargaining chip, a tangible piece of evidence he could use to negotiate his own survival. The digital clock on my dashboard read 2 a.m. My encrypted burner phone vibrated in the cup holder. The harsh buzzing sound startled me in the quiet vehicle. Only one person possessed this specific unlisted number. I routed the digits through a fabricated email server earlier today as a deliberate silent trap, hoping someone would grow desperate enough to reach out. I pressed the glowing green icon to accept the call. "Giovanni," a voice whispered through the speaker. It was Marcus. His breathing sounded shallow and erratic. Background traffic noise indicated he was walking outside, likely hiding in a dark alley to avoid detection by his creditors. I remained silent, letting the heavy pause amplify his mounting terror. "I know you are listening," Marcus pleaded, his tone laced with raw desperation. "Vivian and Trent are framing me. They are telling their lawyers I orchestrated the insurance fraud. I have nothing left. The loan sharks are circling my building. I need a way out." "You chose your path 4 years ago," I replied, my voice a cold, unyielding blade in the dark car. "Wait," he begged, his words tumbling out in a frantic, hurried rush. "I have something you need. I was at Trent's office this evening trying to beg for cash. I saw him talking to shadow mercenaries. I know he hired them to find you. When he left the room to yell at his secretary, I took his secondary burner phone from his desk drawer. It contains the encrypted messages he sent to the hitters. It also has the original text logs proving he planned the river trip." I gripped the steering wheel. The leather creaked under the sudden pressure. That device was the final puzzle piece. It provided the direct, indisputable link connecting Trent to the attempted homicide. The financial documents would put them in prison for theft, but the burner phone would guarantee they never saw the outside of a cell again. "I will hand the physical device over to you tonight," Marcus offered his voice, breaking into a pathetic whine. "I will give you the phone and I will write a full confession detailing everything Vivian did. Just drop the civil suits against me. Give me enough cash to disappear before the feds issue the warrants. Meet me." I stared through the rain-slicked windshield. My brother was attempting to sell out his accomplices to save his own skin, repeating the exact cycle of betrayal that put me in the river. He thought he could negotiate a clean exit. He thought the blood could be washed away with a simple transaction. "I will send you an address," I stated, severing the connection before he could utter another word. I placed the phone back into the cup holder. I had the location of the burner phone, but trusting Marcus was a fool errand. He was a desperate animal backed into a corner, and desperate animals possess unpredictable instincts. The final confrontation was drawing near. Moving away from corporate servers and sterile bank vaults, the digital war was ending. The physical reckoning was about to begin. I told Marcus to keep his head down and wait for my signal. A physical handoff in a dark alley offered too many unpredictable variables at this exact moment. Trent and Vivian were bleeding cash, but they still held one final card. Despite filing secret divorce papers and preparing to betray each other to federal prosecutors, they required immediate capital. They organized an elite investor pitch at the premier hotel in downtown Boise. They intended to smile, hold hands, and defraud one last room of venture capitalists to fund their respective criminal defense teams. I refused to let them secure that lifeline. Getting inside the venue required minimal effort. High society events rely on invisible labor. I traded my thrift store suit for a black polo shirt and a dark canvas utility belt, blending seamlessly into the audio-visual crew hired to manage the ballroom. I carried a coil of heavy coaxial cable over my shoulder. I walked past the hired security detail without drawing a single glance. I approached the primary control booth situated at the rear of the grand ballroom. The staging area hummed with thick tension. Waiters polished crystal flutes, while lighting technicians adjusted the overhead spotlights. Vivian always thrived in these opulent environments. Before the embezzlement started, she treated our annual charity dinners like calculated military campaigns. She understood that wealthy people invest in the illusion of success rather than the actual math. She firmly believed a tailored dress and a confident laugh could conceal a staggering deficit. I watched her glide across the patterned carpet near the main stage. She wore a sleek emerald gown, masking the panic currently consuming her mind. She smiled at a local banking executive, portraying the picture of a thriving technology founder. Her pristine performance made my jaw tighten. I unpacked my tools inside the dim control booth. The primary technician was busy fighting an audio feedback loop on the stage monitors. I offered to manage the presentation server. He nodded, eager to delegate the task. I connected a small encrypted flash drive to the central processing unit. My custom override script silently nested itself inside the hotel presentation software. The trap was armed. I only needed to wait for the spotlight to hit the target. The ballroom doors opened. Dozens of wealthy investors filed into the room. They took their seats at round tables adorned with expensive floral centerpieces. The house lights dimmed. Trent paced nervously in the dark corridor just behind the staging curtain. His breathing sounded shallow and uneven. He adjusted his collar. He was sweating under the crushing pressure of his impending ruin. I stepped out of the booth, adjusting a lapel microphone, and walked directly toward him. I kept my face angled downward, obscured by the shadows and a dark baseball cap. I reached out and clipped the wireless transmitter to his belt. Trent let out a weary, exhausted sigh. His usual arrogance was failing him. The scent of his expensive cologne mixed with the sharp odor of fear sweat. "Make sure the equalization is sharp on this microphone," Trent muttered, addressing me as nameless hired help. My voice is hoarse. It has been an incredibly difficult week. You cannot imagine the kind of stress I am dealing with right now. It feels like unseen forces are trying to tear my life apart. I routed a microphone wire under his jacket. My knuckles brushed against his silk shirt. "Stress can feel suffocating," I replied, keeping my voice low and heavily modulated. "Almost like drowning. Just focus on the presentation. Everything will become clear soon." Trent chuckled. It was a hollow, bitter sound. "You have no idea, buddy. Just hit the slides on my cue." He stepped through the heavy velvet curtain and out into the glaring stage lights. Polite applause rippled through the audience. Vivian sat in the front row, forcing a supportive, admiring gaze. Trent grasped the podium. He launched into his rehearsed pitch. He promised exponential returns and revolutionary software solutions. He used empty buzzwords, spinning a web of deceit designed to extract millions of dollars from the audience. He spoke about trust innovation and securing the future. "Let us look at the internal revenue projections for the next quarter," Trent announced. He gestured confidently toward the enormous projection screens flanking the stage. He clicked his wireless remote. I stood in the control booth and tapped the enter key on my console. The hotel network hijacked the video feed. The screens went pitch black for a fraction of a second. A harsh burst of static pierced the audio system. Several investors covered their ears to block the shrill noise. Then the black screens illuminated with a blinding white glare. Trent did not turn around immediately. He assumed a simple technical glitch had occurred. He continued speaking, but the words died in his throat as a collective gasp swept through the crowd. Murmurs of utter confusion erupted from the front tables. Trent finally looked over his shoulder. The projection screens did not display his fabricated revenue charts. They broadcasted the stark, undeniable offshore bank ledgers. Bright red highlights marked the illicit transfers flowing directly from our stolen corporate client accounts into Trent personal holding firms. The numbers painted a vast, irrefutable picture of theft. Before Trent could signal the crew to cut the feed, the image shifted. A high-resolution scan of my forged death certificate appeared. It was positioned side by side with the notarized contract detailing the division of the stolen funds. The dates clearly proved the embezzlement preceded my supposed accidental drowning. The ballroom descended into sheer chaos. Wealthy financiers stood up from their chairs. They pulled out their smartphones to record the visual evidence of a colossal fraud. They realized they were sitting in a room with a desperate thief. Vivian leaped to her feet. Her emerald dress rustled as she shrieked at the audiovisual crew to kill the power. Her polished facade cracked entirely, exposing the terrified criminal beneath. I did not stop there. The screens shifted a third time. The digital topographical map of the Snake River filled the displays. 2 linking red dots tracked the movement of their cellular devices down the muddy embankment. A timeline ticked across the bottom of the screen. It proved they stood at the river edge at the exact moment I fought the freezing rapids. The text, "Attempted homicide suspect data," flashed in bold yellow letters. The investors did not just recoil, they fled. The promise of profit vanished, replaced by the toxic stench of a murder investigation. Chairs scraped loudly against the floor as executives rushed toward the exit doors. They shouted into their phones, commanding their risk management teams to sever all ties with Trent and his holding companies. The emergency funding he desperately needed to pay his predatory lenders evaporated in real time. His last lifeline burned to ash. I unplugged my flash drive from the central processing unit. I slid the metal device into my pocket. The objective was fulfilled. Their public destruction was irrevocable. I pulled the brim of my cap lower and stepped out of the control booth. I moved quietly toward the rear service corridor. The panic in the room provided the perfect cover. As I pushed open the heavy kitchen service doors, I paused. I looked back toward the stage. Trent stood frozen at the podium. He was surrounded by the ruins of his life. He scanned the fleeing crowd. His eyes were wild with a primal, desperate panic. His gaze swept over the audio-visual crew. It locked onto my figure standing in the doorway. He did not see a nameless technician. The shadow of my profile under the dim exit sign registered in his fracturing mind. He recognized the ghost. The panic in his expression morphed into something far more dangerous. His jaw clenched. His hands curled into tight fists at his sides. The facade of the corporate executive melted away. It left behind a cornered, lethal animal. He realized the digital warfare had ended. His eyes burned with a dark, homicidal resolve. He was coming to finish the job he started 4 years ago. The cold rain washed the stench of the ruined hotel gala from my clothes as I navigated my rental sedan toward the outskirts of Boise. I left Trent paralyzed on the stage, a ruined executive staring at the ashes of his stolen empire. But cornered predators rarely surrender. They double down. I sent a secure text message to my brother dictating a specific set of global positioning coordinates. The location was a decommissioned lumber mill resting on the edge of the city limits. The sprawling industrial graveyard offered isolated darkness, rusted metal, and the perfect acoustic environment for a trap. I arrived an hour before the scheduled meeting. The scent of decaying pine and wet iron filled the frigid night air. I parked my vehicle behind a dilapidated warehouse, ensuring the taillights were hidden from the main access road. My time in the clinic scrubbing floors taught me the value of thorough preparation. I spent 30 minutes establishing a surveillance perimeter. I scaled a rusted catwalk and mounted 3 miniature high-definition cameras to the steel girders overhead. Their wide-angle lenses provided a flawless, overlapping view of the central loading bay. I hopped down from the catwalk, the gravel crunching softly beneath my thrift store shoes. I reached beneath the collar of my dark polo shirt, tracing the thin wire of the lapel microphone taped securely against my collarbone. The device carried a dual transmission signal engineered to bypass standard radio interference. I tested the connection, tapping the microphone twice. A faint green light blinked on the receiver hidden in my pocket, confirming the audio feed was live and broadcasting. Headlights pierced the thick curtain of rain sweeping across the rusted, corrugated metal of the central warehouse. A battered sedan rolled to a halt in the center of the loading bay. The engine sputtered and died. The driver's side door creaked open, and Marcus stepped out into the storm. He pulled his thin jacket tight against the chill. He glanced around the desolate yard, his shoulders hunched, jumping at every shadow. My brother spent his entire life avoiding the heavy lifting of reality. When we were young, he shied away from hard labor, preferring to gamble his allowance on backyard card games rather than earn an honest wage. He always searched for a shortcut, a quick scheme to bypass the struggle. That inherent weakness made him the perfect pawn for Vivian and Trent. They purchased his silence with a fraction of my life insurance, and he gladly took the silver. Now the shortcut led him to an abandoned lumber mill in the dead of night, hunting for a new savior. I stepped out from behind a stack of rotting timber pallets. The dim, ambient light from a distant street lamp cast long, distorted shadows across the gravel. Marcus flinched, taking a quick step backward. "Giovanni," he stammered, his voice thin and reedy over the drumming rain. "I brought it. I brought the phone, just like I promised." He reached into his jacket pocket with a trembling hand, retrieving a thick, black mobile device. He held it out like an offering, a peace treaty forged in pure cowardice. "Just give me the cash you promised," Marcus pleaded, swiping the wet hair from his forehead. "Drop the civil suits. Vivian and Trent are finished." The investors ran out of the hotel. I saw the news alerts on my phone. "The authorities are freezing everything. I need to leave Idaho tonight before the local bookies find me." I did not reach for the device. I stood perfectly still, letting the freezing rain soak into my shirt. I watched his eyes dart around the perimeter, sensing the distinct shift in the atmosphere. A sharp, crisp sound sliced through the steady hum of the storm. It was the distinct crunch of expensive Italian leather soles grinding against the wet gravel. The rhythmic footsteps echoed from the darkened alleyway between the twin warehouses. Trent always bragged about his bespoke Oxfords, claiming the handcrafted leather projected an aura of undeniable authority. In a boardroom, the shoes commanded respect. In an abandoned industrial park, the rigid leather betrayed his attempt at a stealth approach. Trent emerged from the shadows. His tailored suit jacket was ruined, soaked through, and clinging to his frame. The polished corporate facade was entirely gone. He looked feral. His eyes were wide, bloodshot, and burning with a dark, homicidal resolve. His right hand gripped a heavy, rusted steel wrench. He dragged the metallic head along the side of a discarded shipping container. The screeching sound sent a shiver down Marcus's spine. "You really thought you could walk away with my burner phone?" Marcus Trent snarled, his voice guttural and raw. "You thought you could sell me out to the ghost and catch a red-eye flight to safety? Marcus backed away, his hands raised in a frantic gesture of surrender. "Trent, listen to me," he begged, his voice cracking. "We are trapped. The financial ledgers are public. The venture capitalists know about the embezzlement. The money is gone. This is the only way out for me." "The money is gone because your dead brother crawled out of the mud to steal it back." Trent spat, turning his lethal glare toward me. He took a menacing step forward, lifting the heavy steel wrench. The metal glinted under the faint streetlight. "You ruined everything, Giovanni. I spent 4 years building an empire, and you tore it down in 3 days. I should have held your head under the water myself, instead of just kicking the branch away." The admission hung in the cold air, captured flawlessly by the hidden lapel microphone. "You cannot kill us both, Trent," my brother whimpered, pressing his back against the rusted door of his sedan. "The police are already building a case. I do not need to kill you both," Trent countered, a dark smirk twisting his features. "I just need to kill Giovanni. You are going to take the fall for it, Marcus." I remained motionless, my posture relaxed. I utilized the precise psychological warfare I honed during high-stakes corporate audits. "You should check your pockets, Marcus," I said, keeping my tone smooth and analytical. "Ask Trent about the one-way ticket to Mexico he purchased under your identity 3 hours ago. Ask him about the $50,000 he wired into a holding account bearing your Social Security number." Marcus blinked, his confusion morphing into a dawning horror. "What is he talking about, Trent?" "He needs a scapegoat," I explained, driving the wedge deep into their fractured alliance. "Trent cannot outrun the federal embezzlement charges on his own. But if the authorities find my bludgeoned body in an abandoned lumber mill, and they find a fresh paper trail proving you fled the country with a sudden influx of cash, the narrative writes itself. The desperate, gambling-addicted brother murders the returned amnesiac to protect his payout, then flees the jurisdiction. Trent intends to hand you to the wolves to secure a plea deal for himself." Trent tightened his grip on the wrench, his knuckles turning white. "Shut your mouth," he commanded, stepping toward me. Marcus stared at the man he once considered an ally. The ultimate betrayal clicked into place. He spent his life avoiding responsibility, but he suddenly realized he was about to absorb the penalty for a murder he did not commit. The sheer terror of spending the rest of his life in a federal penitentiary ignited a primal, desperate fury inside his chest. The eternal pawn finally snapped. Marcus let out a feral roar. He abandoned his submissive posture and launched himself across the wet gravel. He tackled Trent with blind, chaotic momentum. The heavy steel wrench clattered to the ground as both men crashed into the mud. The fight was brutal and uncoordinated. They traded savage punches, rolling through the freezing puddles. Marcus grabbed handfuls of Trent's ruined suit jacket, slamming a fist into his jaw. Trent retaliated, driving his knee into Marcus' ribs with a sickening thud. They cursed each other, screaming explicit threats and hurling accusations into the night. "I told you to make sure he was dead in the river." Marcus shrieked, landing a glancing blow across Trent's cheekbone. "You promised me the insurance money was clean, you greedy parasite." Trent roared back, spitting a mouthful of blood onto the gravel. "You gladly took your cut of the $10 million we embezzled from the firm. You knew exactly where the cash originated." I stepped backward, seeking the shelter of the corrugated metal awning. I folded my arms and watched them tear each other apart. Every vicious punch, every breathless accusation, and every explicit admission of their roles in the river conspiracy and the corporate theft funneled directly into the microphone taped to my chest. They were digging their own graves with their bare hands, providing a flawless, unedited confession. Trent managed to gain the upper hand. He shoved Marcus off his chest, scrambling through the mud to retrieve the discarded steel wrench. He wrapped his fingers around the rusted handle, rising to his knees with a murderous glint in his eye. Marcus scrambled backward, gasping for air, clutching his bruised ribs. Before Trent could swing the weapon, a distinct, piercing sound echoed through the desolate industrial park. It started as a faint wail on the edge of the city limits. Within seconds, the noise amplified, multiplying into a chorus of shrill, demanding sirens. Flashing red and blue lights reflected off the low-hanging storm clouds, tearing through the darkness of the surrounding neighborhood. The police cruisers were approaching fast, tires screeching as they turned onto the main access road leading to the lumber mill. Trent froze, the heavy wrench hovering in the air. His chest heaved as he stared at the approaching lights. He turned his head, and his wide, terrified eyes locking onto my face. "You called the cops," Trent gasped, the realization draining the last ounce of fight from his body. I offered him a cold, unyielding smile. I reached up and tapped the lapel of my dark polo shirt. "I did not just call them Trent," I replied, my voice echoing clearly over the approaching sirens. I live-streamed the audio of this entire conversation directly to the Boise Police Dispatch. They heard every single word. The blinding glare of 6 police cruisers pierced the torrential rain, painting the rusted, corrugated metal of the lumber mill in frantic flashes of crimson and sapphire. The screech of tires grinding to a halt on the wet gravel overpowered the steady roar of the storm. Tactical spotlights swiveled, cutting through the darkness and pinning Trent and Marcus in overlapping pools of harsh white light. The trap snapped shut with flawless precision. Trent stood frozen in the mud. The heavy steel wrench slipped from his trembling fingers. The metal weapon struck the ground with a dull, hollow thud. He did not attempt to run. He did not raise his fists to fight. The sheer, overwhelming presence of local law enforcement broke the last fragile remnants of his executive pride. He raised his hands slowly above his head, turning his face away from the blinding beams. Marcus reacted with pure, unfiltered panic. He dropped to his knees in the freezing puddles, raising his arms and sobbing openly. He screamed his surrender, shouting disjointed excuses and begging the approaching officers to listen to his side of the story. Uniformed officers swarmed the loading bay, their boots splashing through the water. 2 patrolmen flanked Trent, grabbing his tailored, ruined jacket and shoving him face first against the rusted side of the shipping container. They pulled his arms behind his back, forcing his wrists together. The heavy, metallic click of the steel handcuffs snapping securely around his wrists echoed sharply in the damp night air. The rhythmic ratcheting sound provided a profound sense of poetic justice. The man who tried to drown me to secure an empire was now bound in iron, stripped of his wealth and his freedom. A senior detective approached my position under the metal awning. He lowered his flashlight, recognizing me from the digital dossier I transmitted to the precinct dispatch during the fight. I handed him the encrypted burner phone Marcus brought to the lumber mill, along with a pristine flash drive containing the raw audio file of their brutal confrontation. I outlined the legal parameters of the evidence, maintaining a calm, analytical tone. The audio recording provided undisputed probable cause. Trent explicitly confessed to kicking my lifeline away during the flash flood. Marcus admitted to covering up the crime for a cut of the stolen capital. The detective listened intently, his expression hardening. He confirmed the local prosecutor possessed enough tangible proof to elevate the dormant 4-year-old missing persons inquiry into an active, high-priority attempted homicide investigation. Trent and Marcus were booked for aggravated assault and conspiracy to commit murder on the spot. I retreated to my rental sedan as the officers loaded my former partner and my brother into the back of the squad cars. The local police handled the violent offenses, but the financial reckoning required a higher tier of jurisdiction. I powered up my pawnshop laptop, connecting to my secure offshore proxy network. During my early career, I often collaborated with federal regulators to untangle complex corporate fraud. I understood exactly how to package evidence to guarantee an immediate grand jury indictment. I compiled the high-resolution scans of the notarized vault contracts, the offshore routing ledgers, and the keystroke biometric data proving Trent forged my signature. I drafted a concise, devastating report detailing the $10 million embezzlement scheme. I transmitted the entire encrypted portfolio directly to the regional director of the Federal Financial Crimes Division. By dawn, federal agents would draft the sweeping warrants required to seize every remaining asset tied to their syndicate. The storm broke by early morning, leaving Boise bathed in a cold, pale light. I sat in a secluded diner sipping black coffee and watching the local news broadcast on a wall-mounted television. The overnight arrests at the lumber mill dominated the headlines. Reporters stood outside the county jail detailing the shocking resurrection of Giovanni Indigo and the subsequent attempted murder charges leveled against his former business partner and his brother. The media frenzy forced the remaining conspirators into the spotlight. The broadcast shifted to a live press conference taking place outside an upscale downtown condominium complex. My mother, Sylvia, stood behind a cluster of news microphones. She held a sleek black umbrella to shield herself from the lingering drizzle. She wore dark designer sunglasses and a somber pearl necklace, playing the role of the devastated matriarch to perfection. Sylvia realized the embezzlement funds were frozen and the murder conspiracy was public knowledge. To salvage her precious country club reputation, she needed to sever her ties to the sinking ship. She delivered a pathetic, fabricated statement to the gathered press. Her voice trembled with rehearsed sorrow as she publicly disowned Marcus. She claimed her youngest son was a troubled soul who deceived her for years. She painted herself as a tragic victim, a mother manipulated by greedy children. She expressed profound joy at my survival, lying through her teeth while cameras flashed. She refused to answer any questions regarding the $500,000 bribe she attempted to wire to the Cayman Islands just yesterday. Her performance was a masterclass in self-preservation. She gladly threw her youngest son to the wolves to ensure her Tuesday afternoon bridge club still accepted her. I turned my attention away from the television and back to my digital dashboard. Sylvia was irrelevant now. She possessed no money and no power. The true threat remained isolated inside the custom-built estate. Vivian was alone. Her husband sat in a concrete holding cell. Her brother-in-law was singing to the detectives to secure a plea deal. The federal authorities possessed the vault contracts, proving her direct involvement as the chief financial officer of the embezzled firm. The walls of her pristine mansion were closing in, shrinking her world to the size of a prison cell. I monitored the network traffic emanating from her residential router. The data packets moved with frantic, erratic speed. Vivian knew the standard banking channels were heavily monitored and currently restricted by local injunctions. She realized the federal warrants would drop before noon. She needed untraceable liquidity, and she needed it fast. My Intercept software flagged a sudden connection to a decentralized blockchain exchange. Vivian bypassed her standard checking accounts entirely. She plugged a physical hardware wallet into her personal computer, accessing an emergency cryptocurrency reserve she kept hidden from Trent and the authorities. The digital ledger showed a balance of roughly $200,000 in unlisted digital tokens. It was her ultimate contingency fund. I watched the live transaction logs as she rapidly liquidated the digital assets, converting the tokens into anonymous, untraceable funds. She routed the capital through a series of dark web mixing services, attempting to wash the digital fingerprints clean. Her next maneuver confirmed her true intent. She accessed a secure portal for a premier aviation company operating out of a small private regional airfield 30 miles outside the city. The charter company specialized in discreet, high-end travel for wealthy clients looking to bypass crowded commercial terminals and standard security checkpoints. Vivian booked a twin-engine private charter flight. She paid the exorbitant last-minute booking fee using the freshly laundered cryptocurrency. I intercepted the flight manifest. She requested a direct, uninterrupted route soaring straight over the Canadian border. She did not pack a suitcase. She did not say goodbye to her mother-in-law. She simply gathered her passport and her cold storage wallet. She intended to vanish into the northern wilderness, escaping the federal indictments and leaving her ruined accomplices to face the judge alone. The diner television faded into meaningless background noise as I focused entirely on the blinking cursor of my laptop screen. Vivian believed she secured a clean exit. She traded her opulent lifestyle for a digital cold storage wallet and a seat on a twin-engine jet heading north. She relied on the inherent discretion of private aviation to mask her escape. Wealthy clients expect to bypass the rigorous scrutiny of commercial security checkpoints, trading cash for invisibility. That assumption was her final, fatal error. Private charter firms operating out of regional airfields prioritize luxury over digital fortification. They invest heavily in leather seats and premium catering, leaving their network infrastructure vulnerable to basic infiltration. I routed my proxy connection toward the administrative servers of the aviation company she contracted. The firewall defending their flight manifests was outdated, designed to repel simple spam rather than a targeted strike by a senior auditor. I breached the primary gateway in under 4 minutes. I navigated through the passenger logs until I found her booking. She registered under her legal name, assuming the federal warrants had not yet propagated through the national database. She was correct. Bureaucracy moves with a sluggish, lumbering pace. I needed to accelerate the timeline. I accessed the secure portal linking the charter company directly to the Department of Homeland Security screening system. I isolated Vivian passport identification number. Using my forged compliance credentials, I injected a lethal string of code into her traveler profile. I did not just flag her as a routine person of interest. I elevated her status to a Level 1 federal flight risk, attaching the pending $10 million embezzlement and attempted homicide dockets directly to her identity. The automated system reacted with immediate, ruthless efficiency. A high-priority alert triggered at the nearest Customs and Border Protection field office. Tactical teams were mobilizing before Vivian even reached the runway. I packed my equipment and paid my diner tab in cash. The regional airfield sat 30 miles outside city limits, nestled against the foothills of the Boise Ridge. I merged onto the highway, keeping my speed steady. The storm clouds began to scatter, revealing patches of pale blue sky, but the chill in the air remained sharp and biting. The Idaho landscape stretched out in all directions, wide and unforgiving. I intended to watch the final pillar of their syndicate crumble into dust. I arrived at the perimeter of the airfield and parked near a chain-link fence overlooking the private hangars. A sleek silver jet sat on the tarmac, its engines whining with a low building intensity. Fuel trucks detached their hoses, signaling an imminent departure. Ground crews moved with hurried efficiency to prepare the aircraft. Through the expansive floor-to-ceiling windows of the luxury terminal, I spotted my wife. Vivian sat in a plush leather armchair, exuding an aura of untouchable relief. She traded her emerald evening gown for a stark black designer trench coat. Her posture was relaxed. Her legs were crossed, and she held a delicate crystal flute of vintage champagne. She gazed out at the runway, a faint, victorious smile playing on her lips. She believed she outsmarted the trap. She thought she could discard Trent and Marcus to the wolves while she enjoyed a quiet, untraceable life in a foreign country funded by digital tokens. During our marriage, Vivian treated every relationship as a transactional stepping stone. She viewed loyalty as a weakness and wealth as an impenetrable shield. Now she was alone, drinking a final toast to her own perceived brilliance. The distant wail of sirens shattered the morning calm. The noise grew deafening in mere seconds. A convoy of black tactical vehicles tore through the main gates of the airfield, ignoring the standard security checkpoints. Tires squealed against the damp asphalt as the heavy sport utility vehicles formed a tight barricade around the silver jet. Heavily armed federal agents poured out of the transports. They wore dark tactical gear adorned with the bold yellow letters of Customs and Border Protection. They moved with coordinated, unyielding precision, securing the perimeter and storming the steps of the private terminal. Inside the glass-walled lounge, Vivian's victorious smile vanished. She bolted upright from her leather chair. The reality of her situation hit her with the force of a freight train. The walls of her invincible fortress dissolved into thin air. Her fingers went slack. The crystal flute slipped from her grasp. It fell toward the polished concrete floor, hitting the surface with a sharp, distinct fracture. The glass shattered into 100 jagged pieces, scattering pale champagne and crystal shards across the ground. The visual perfectly mirrored the exact moment she dropped her handbag in the courtroom 48 hours ago. Her panic always manifested in broken things. Federal agents breached the lounge doors, their commands echoing over the tarmac. They surrounded Vivian, ordering her to keep her hands visible. The lead investigator stepped forward, holding a printed copy of the severe flight risk alert. He informed her she was under immediate federal detainment pending grand jury indictments for wire fraud and conspiracy. Vivian's fractured mind unraveled. She could not comprehend a reality where her money failed to protect her. In her world, every problem carried a price tag. She reached into the pocket of her trench coat. The agents instinctively tightened their grip on their weapons, barking strict orders for her to freeze. She slowly withdrew the small metallic hardware wallet. Her hands shook uncontrollably. She held the device out toward the lead agent, her voice cracking with raw, unhinged desperation. "There is $200,000 in untraceable currency on this drive," Vivian pleaded, her eyes darting between the armed men. "Take it. Divide it among yourselves. Just let me board that plane. Look the other way for 10 minutes. I will give you everything." The lead agent stared at her with unvarnished disgust. He unclipped his handcuffs. He read her Miranda rights in a flat, clinical tone, seamlessly adding a severe federal bribery charge to her mounting list of felonies. Her attempt to buy her freedom only guaranteed a longer sentence. They secured her wrists behind her back. The cold steel locked into place, echoing the exact fate of her husband at the lumber mill. The tactical team began marching her out of the terminal, guiding her toward the waiting transport vehicles. I stepped out from behind the rear bumper of an armored vehicle. The morning sun caught the edge of my thrift store suit. Vivian halted. Her escorting agents paused, sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere. She stared at me, her eyes wide with a primal, agonizing horror. She realized I did not just survive her plot. I orchestrated every single detail of her downfall. I severed her finances, destroyed her marriage, grounded her flight, and watched her beg. Her knees buckled. The federal agents struggled to keep her upright as she slumped toward the damp asphalt. Tears carved dark, jagged paths through her ruined makeup. "Giovanni, please," she sobbed, her voice reduced to a pathetic, broken whimper. "I am sorry. I was afraid. Trent made me do it. Please, show me some mercy. I am your wife." I looked down at the woman who signed my death certificate. I felt no anger, no sorrow, and no lingering affection. The space inside my chest held nothing but surgical detachment. "You buried me 4 years ago, Vivian," I stated, my voice steady and unyielding. "I am just returning the favor." 6 months passed. The federal justice system does not sprint. It operates like an unyielding glacier, crushing everything caught in its path with slow, methodical precision. The grand jury indictments transitioned into a swift, undeniable trial. The prosecution possessed a flawless arsenal of evidence. They presented the offshore routing ledgers, the intercepted audio recording from the abandoned lumber mill, and the notarized embezzlement contracts retrieved from the bank vault. The defense attorneys scrambled, offering plea deals and desperately pointing fingers at one another. But the federal judge possessed zero tolerance for elite corruption. I sat in the back row of the federal courthouse gallery on the morning of their sentencing. The bright morning light filtered through the high arched windows, casting long shadows across the polished wooden benches. I watched the bailiffs escort the 4 defendants into the room. The transformation was striking. The bespoke Italian suits, the pearl necklaces, and the emerald evening gowns were gone. They wore matching drab orange uniforms. Their wrists and ankles were secured by heavy steel chains that rattled with every reluctant step. Trent stared straight ahead, his eyes hollow and devoid of the arrogant spark that once defined his executive persona. The crushing weight of his reality had stripped away his confidence, leaving a terrified, broken shell. Marcus kept his head bowed, his shoulders trembling, as quiet sobs escaped his throat. He spent his life searching for shortcuts, and the final shortcut led him straight to a concrete cell. Sylvia, a woman who prized country club status above her own flesh and blood, looked pale and frail. The pristine illusion of her high society matriarchy had eroded, exposing the ruthless, selfish core beneath. Vivian walked at the end of the line. Her manicured nails were chipped. Her perfectly styled hair hung in tangled, lifeless strands. When the judge ordered them to stand for the reading of the verdict, she squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the impact of her own choices. The gavel struck the sound block. The judge handed down the sentences with stern, unwavering finality. Wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, attempted manslaughter. The gavel fell again and again, cementing their doom. The federal mandates carried decades of mandatory prison time, without the possibility of early parole. The magistrate denied all post-conviction bail requests, citing their proven history of extreme flight risk and offshore financial manipulation. The bailiff stepped forward, guiding the shackled syndicate out of the courtroom and into the dark corridors leading to the federal transport buses. They walked out of my life forever, bound for iron cages. The legal retribution concluded, but the financial reckoning required one final maneuver. During the initial days of my return, I utilized an untraceable shell firm named Riverstone Capital to purchase Trent predatory commercial loans. I was his sole creditor. I held the deed to his ruin. With Trent incarcerated and his assets seized to repay the $10 million corporate deficit, his personal debts defaulted. The legal clauses embedded within those hard money contracts granted me unilateral authority to foreclose on the collateral. The primary collateral was the custom estate I designed and built. I drove to the property on a crisp Tuesday morning, flanked by 2 county sheriff deputies carrying formal eviction and foreclosure notices. We bypassed the iron security gates and walked up the sweeping aggregate driveway. The house stood silent, a luxurious monument to their deceit. The deputies breached the front door, ensuring the premises remained vacant. I stepped into the grand foyer, my footsteps echoing off the imported marble tiles. The air inside felt heavy, carrying the lingering scent of Vivian expensive perfume and the faint aroma of stale cigars from Trent private study. I wandered through the vast, empty rooms. I paused by the decorative fountain in the atrium, noting the absence of the diamond ring Vivian hurled into the water during their final, desperate argument. The authorities retrieved it as evidence, adding it to the mountain of forfeited assets. I walked into the master suite, staring at the panoramic windows overlooking the Boise foothills. This house once represented my greatest achievements, but their presence had infected the architecture. I refused to live inside a museum of betrayal. I pulled my mobile device from my pocket and dialed a premier contracting firm. I instructed the foreman to send a demolition crew by the end of the week. I ordered them to tear the interior down to the bare wooden studs, rip out the marble, and shatter the imported glass. I intended to rebuild the structure from the foundation upward, erasing every single trace of their existence from my sanctuary. With the ghosts banished from my home, I turned my attention to the future. I reclaimed my legitimate identity, restoring my frozen bank accounts and taking control of the recovered wealth. The authorities successfully clawed back the $5 million life insurance payout from the various dummy corporations, returning the capital to the original underwriter. However, my legitimate investment portfolios and the real estate holdings I built before the flood generated an immense, untouched fortune. I possessed more resources than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I decided to channel that power into a profound new purpose. I leased a sprawling sunlit office in the center of the downtown financial district. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping, unobstructed view of the rugged Idaho skyline. I sat behind a vast, polished mahogany desk, breathing in the scent of fresh leather and limitless potential. A thick, embossed legal portfolio rested on the desk blotter. I opened the leather folder, revealing the establishing charter for the Indigo Foundation. It was a heavily funded, nonprofit, philanthropic initiative designed to revolutionize disaster response protocols across the Pacific Northwest. I understood the agonizing, suffocating terror of fighting a wild river in the dark. I knew what it meant to wait for a rescue team that never arrived, because the people you trusted chose to look the other way. The foundation possessed a singular, unwavering mission. We funded the development and deployment of rapid response rescue technology for regional emergency services. We purchased fleets of high-altitude drones equipped with advanced thermal imaging cameras capable of scanning miles of treacherous riverbanks and dense mountain forests in minutes. We provided grants for elite swiftwater rescue training, ensuring no victim would ever be abandoned to the freezing currents. I weaponized the wealth they tried to steal, transforming my darkest hour into a beacon of survival for thousands of others. I reached for the breast pocket of my tailored navy suit jacket. I withdrew a heavy, pristine fountain pen. As I unscrewed the cap, the cuff of my shirt pulled back, revealing my left wrist. Resting against my pulse was the 1960s Patek Philippe watch my grandfather wore. I utilized a team of private investigators to track down the elite Oregon breeder who purchased the heirloom from Vivian. I bought it back, reclaiming the physical legacy she casually traded for a household pet. I ran my thumb over the smooth crystal face of the vintage timepiece. The mechanical hands ticked in a steady, reassuring rhythm. The watch was a tangible anchor, a reminder of the relentless forward march of time. I checked the dial, noting the exact hour and minute. I lowered the fountain pen to the thick parchment paper. With a firm, steady hand, I signed my true, resurrected name at the bottom of the charter, cementing my legacy. Later that afternoon, the clear autumn sky began to fade into a rich, deep twilight. I drove my vehicle out of the city limits, following the winding, isolated highway leading into the untamed wilderness. The paved road eventually gave way to loose gravel and dirt. I parked the car on a high ridge and stepped out into the crisp, biting wind. I walked down the steep, muddy embankment, my boots finding secure purchase on the familiar, treacherous terrain. The roar of the Snake River grew louder with every step, a deafening, chaotic symphony of raw, natural power. I stopped at the very edge of the water. This was the exact location. This was the precise patch of muddy earth where Trent kicked the heavy pine branch away, sending me into the black depths. For 4 agonizing years, the sound of rushing water haunted my dreams. It represented the ultimate destruction, a terrifying void that stripped away my identity and my past. I stood on the muddy bank looking down at the swirling, freezing rapids. The river churned fiercely, crashing against the submerged bedrock. The fear was gone. The suffocating phantom chill no longer gripped my lungs. The roaring water did not symbolize my demise. It reflected my unbreakable, profound resilience. The river tried to bury me, and my family tried to erase me, but they both failed. I did not just survive their lethal betrayal. I harnessed the trauma. I dismantled a highly toxic syndicate of thieves and stepped boldly into a magnificent, untouchable future. I took one final deep breath of the cold mountain air, turned my back on the water, and walked up the ridge toward the life I truly deserved. The story of Giovanni Indigo is not merely a tale of offshore ledgers, stolen mountain cabins, or thrilling courtroom resurrections. Beneath the surface of the frozen river and the shattered champagne glasses lies a far more profound, quiet tragedy. It is a tragedy rooted in the very living rooms and dining tables where families are built. When the gavel finally falls and the prison doors slide shut, we are left staring at the wreckage of a home that rotted from the inside out long before the floodwaters ever rose. The true lesson, echoing from the damp concrete of the industrial park, is a stark warning about the foundation of American parenting, family responsibility, and the long-term guidance we provide to our children. In modern culture, it is remarkably easy to confuse material prosperity with successful parenting. Sylvia Indigo spent her life polishing mahogany furniture and securing exclusive country club memberships. She operated under the tragic delusion that presenting a flawless facade to the neighborhood equated to raising a strong, morally sound family. She taught her sons that external validation was the ultimate currency. When a mother prioritizes appearances over genuine character, she plants seeds of profound moral decay. A child raised to value designer labels and societal status above honesty will eventually view everyone around them, even their own flesh and blood, as expendable stepping stones. Sylvia traded her own son for $500,000 because she spent decades conditioning her mind to believe that comfort and reputation were worth any moral sacrifice. This brings us to the agonizing reality of family responsibility and the concept of fairness in raising children. Look at Marcus. He was a boy who grew into a man without ever feeling the heavy, instructive weight of his own failures. For years, his family served as a permanent safety net. Whenever he gambled away his rent or shirked his duties, someone always stepped in to absorb the damage. We often believe that shielding our children from hardship is an act of love. We rush to clear the obstacles from their path, thinking we are providing a safe harbor. Yet true fairness in parenting requires the courage to let children fall. It requires stepping back and allowing them to face the natural consequences of their actions. Because Marcus never learned how to carry his own burdens, he developed a fragile, cowardly spirit. When the ultimate test of loyalty arrived, he did not possess the internal fortitude to stand by his brother. He chose the easy payout, trading a human life to settle a debt. A child denied the opportunity to build resilience will inevitably shatter under the pressure of the real world, bringing the entire family down with them. A traditional family structure should be a fortress of unconditional support, but support must never be confused with enabling destructive behavior. Emotional awareness is the invisible mortar that holds a traditional family together. It requires parents to cultivate a home where truth is spoken freely, even when the truth is uncomfortable. The Indigo family operated in a sterile, emotional vacuum. They spoke in polite formalities, hiding their resentments behind fake designer ties and forced holiday smiles. A home devoid of emotional honesty becomes a breeding ground for toxic isolation. Children learn how to navigate the world by watching how their parents handle conflict, disappointment, and love. If they see deception rewarded and authenticity punished, they will adapt to survive in the shadows. They will learn to wear masks. Trent and Vivian were able to orchestrate a $10 million embezzlement scheme because they existed in an ecosystem where lying was the accepted native language. If we wish to raise children who act with integrity, we must model that integrity in the quiet, unglamorous moments of our daily lives. Guiding a child through life is a long-term commitment that extends far beyond providing food, shelter, and a college tuition. It is a decades-long process of shaping a human soul. We are tasked with instilling a deep, unwavering moral compass that will guide them when the stakes are high and the room is empty. Honesty is not a trait that appears magically on a person's 18th birthday. It is forged through thousands of tiny corrections, late-night conversations, and difficult apologies. When we emphasize accountability, we teach our children that their actions ripple outward, affecting the lives of everyone they touch. We teach them that true strength is not found in exploiting the weak, but in standing firm in the light of truth, even when the current tries to pull them under. The chilling reality of Giovanni's journey is that the monsters in our lives are rarely strangers hiding in the dark. Often, they are the people sitting across from us at the Thanksgiving table. They are the individuals who know our vulnerabilities, our habits, and our blind spots. Surviving a betrayal of that magnitude requires an iron will and a community that understands the deep, hidden scars left by toxic relatives. If you have ever felt the stinging isolation of being discarded by the people who were supposed to protect you, you are not alone. There is a profound strength in sharing these experiences and learning how to reclaim your own narrative. I encourage you to hit the subscribe button and join the Linda Vengeance channel. We are building a space dedicated to exposing these dark familial dynamics, empowering each other to rise from the ashes and forge a future defined by undeniable independence and truth. Your presence here helps illuminate the path for others navigating their own storms. As the sun sets and the house grows quiet, I find myself lingering on the final image of the roaring river. The water washes away everything that is not anchored to solid rock. It forces us to examine the very foundations of our own lives. We pour our energy into our careers, our investments, and our social standing, hoping to leave a lasting legacy. But the true measure of our time on earth is reflected in the eyes of our children. Look at the people sharing your home tonight. Notice the subtle glances, the unspoken tensions, and the quiet habits forming in the shadows. The choices you make tomorrow morning, the boundaries you enforce, and the honesty you demand will echo through generations. We are all building something every single day, whether we realize it or not. The chilling question that remains hovering in the still air long after the story ends is simply this: are you building a sanctuary of truth that will withstand the flood, or are you quietly constructing the very trap that will one day pull you under?